6 o'clock, I'll call to order this select board meeting for February 22nd, 2021. Two quick housekeeping notes. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and subsequent orders imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with the right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.chelmsfordma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so by accessing the Chelmsford Telemedia website at www.chelmsfordtv.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the town's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Note to everybody who's on the meeting, what is typed in the chat, whether it's private between members or public, is part of the public record, and anybody who does a record request will be able to see the chat box as part of the public record. That being said, we'll start with public service announcements.
I'm not yet able to share my screen, so I'll just read it. The Chelmsford.
You should be. No.
I just tried it. Oh, there we go.
Yes.
The Chelmsford Select Board and School Committee will meet on March 8th, 2021 to appoint one representative to the Neshoba Valley Technical High School Committee for a 3-year term ending March 31st, 2024. Applications are available on the town website at www.chelmsfordma.gov or in the town manager's office. Applications should be forwarded to the town manager's office, 50 Billerica Road, Chelmsford, Mass. 01824 by 4 p.m. on Wednesday, March 3rd, 2021.
Thank you, Virginia.
Is there a time on that? Excuse me. Is that one of our meetings? Is that just prior to our meeting or during one of our meetings?
It's going to be, it's at 6 o'clock, the same night as our meeting.
All right. Thank you. I just changed from computer to the phone. I'm having trouble with my computer, so I'm on the phone now. Thank you.
All right, and we'll go into, yep, thanks, George. We'll go into open session. Is there anybody that would like to address the board? Hold on, Bruce, we got to unmute you. What were you saying, Bruce?
No, is this where I come in?
No,
Okay.
you're on the agenda
All right.
later.
Okay, I'll hold off then. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else in the meeting, so we'll move on from open session. Committee vacancies, Virginia?
Yep. Sorry, the little drop down is in my way. So for committee vacancies, we have the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee has 2 vacancies. The CCA Advisory Committee has 2 vacancies, and the Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee has 2. The Commission on Disabilities has 1 vacancy. The Community Action Program Committee has 1, and the Council on Aging has 1, along with 5 associate member positions. The Cultural Council has 1 vacancy. The Energy Conservation Committee has 2 vacancies. The Holiday Decorating Committee has 1, and the Parade Committee is welcoming all applicants for 1-year terms. The Permanent Building Committee has 1 vacancy. The Personnel Board has 1 vacancy. The Public Celebrations Committee has 5. The Recycling Committee has 1. The Roberts Field Advisory Committee has 1, and the Tree Committee has 2 vacancies. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, complete an application available on the town website or contact the town manager's office at tmoffice@chelmsfordma.gov. 978-250-5202.
All right, now we have a continuation of the public hearing for the pole at Parkerville Road, and we have Paulo unmuted.
Good afternoon, Council. My name is Paulo Sassler. I work as an engineer for National Grid. I apologize for being late last week and missing my opportunity to speak, and for the abutter as well. So my apologies to that. For this particular job, there's a developer building 2 homes, but this one will be serviced from a new pole that we proposed, pole number 31, that the customer, that will be in front of the frontage of this customer, and they will have their service tying into this particular pole because there's no pole close enough to provide power right now. So that's pretty much the scope of this job. Is there anybody with any questions or concerns?
I would like to remind everybody at the last meeting, there was the neighbor there did show up and speak positively about this. I don't see her
Yeah,
on
and
this
she,
meeting.
what she had said was she just wanted to verify there were no changes to the plan from what she had received. Is that still correct, Paulo?
Yes, right now the plan is to put 1 pole to service this home. There may be a future plan in addition to add more poles because to service the second home further back in the property. But right now, that's not in the works. But and I also want to add to the fact that actually this developer sold the home already, and they have the new homeowners living in a hotel for the time being. So just wanted to let you know as well.
So you want to do this as soon as possible, right?
Yeah, the new owners are looking to move in, and National Grid, unfortunately, I did not set a good example in being here present, so that doesn't help either. But yeah, right now the scope is 1 pole, and that's it for this job.
And
Pretty
it should be noted too that we did receive a memo from DPW. They did have some concerns, but then I guess they get a new plan and they now recommend approval.
Yeah, you're correct. I was in an email chain where one of the poles was mislabeled. Instead of pole 30, they referenced pole 32, which wasn't on the plan. But our designer Sam, he was able to send an updated sketch, and like you said, they resent the letter to approve the petition.
Seems pretty
Any other
straightforward.
questions? Yep.
Mhm.
We have a motion to,
Well,
Close
it's a
public
public hearing. Do you want to see if anyone wants to speak?
we can, sorry, I quickly look at the list on here. And is there anybody that would like to speak on this?
If not, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that motion.
A motion is second, all in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
I vote aye. Thanks, Paulo.
I make a
Thank you very much,
motion that
Council.
we approve the National Grid poll petition for Parkerville Road as presented.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion is second, all in favor. Pat?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Now, congratulations, Paulo.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, Council. Have a great night.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the reports and presentations. So who wants to start with the North Chelmsford water? Is it Paul, you or Bruce?
I would assume Bruce may have comments. You've received the submittal that the town's licensed site professional Paul McKinley submitted for this project. As you've seen correspondence from for Bruce, the North Chelmsford Water District, that they had a peer review conduct an audit. And then late this afternoon, we got a response from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection recommending modifications to the plan, which our licensed site professional will respond to, I imagine affirmatively, and we'll get going on this work. So that's the update that I have as of this time.
What were the modifications, Paul, that they recommended?
Many of them were some that were suggested by the water district. Some things were actually things that they wanted to hold off on because of concerns of infiltration and so forth. But others were additional monitoring wells by the water district's wells and so forth. Again, I apologize. It didn't come in until late this afternoon. I forwarded it to you as soon as I saw it about a half hour or so ago. And again, the town will work with our licensed site professional engineer immediately tomorrow to respond and then get going on this. Bruce probably can be more specific in terms of, I'm sure he may have seen the letter that came out by now as well, but it was just came out late this afternoon.
Seems like
Bruce,
they
did you see
did
that letter?
a pretty thorough job, Paul.
Yeah, Bruce, did you
Am I
see the
unmuted?
letter? Yeah, you're
Am I
unmuted,
unmuted,
Bruce.
Paul?
Yeah,
Okay.
did you see the letter?
Yeah, I literally got that letter like you did, probably a half hour
Yeah.
ago.
Okay.
I did read it real quick, and as you know, let me just give a little history of what happened there. We did, as we talked about back on February 24th of last year, if the findings were higher than we thought on the PFAS, that we would consult our engineers, as you would, and as we did, and our engineers recommended that we hire a licensed professional, just do a peer review, and then they were going back and forth with John Fitzgerald. He's the Waste Site Bureau professional from DEP. And there were some good points that he made. One was not to put a bedrock well in at this time because he doesn't want to have a problem. If they fracture the bedrock, there's a possibility that PFAS could transfer from the site to our bedrock well. So that was probably a good point there. A couple of the other points where he wants to, and as Paul said, hold off on putting some of the wells in. They want to find out actually, put some wells in at well 3 and well 4, the two closest to the MW1 well that was the highest in PFOS and PFAS. So, I did talk to Paul McKinley a little bit today. He didn't see this either, so I'm sure he has things to say tomorrow. I think he's been involved with John Fitzgerald also. They've been kind of going back and forth. So everything I think that's in the IRA tonight is not a surprise to them or us. And I have been keeping George Dixon. He's the liaison to the water district. I have been talking to George, kind of keeping him somewhat involved. Any other questions? I mean, whatever we can do, to help you guys out. One of the questions John Fitzgerald did have, if we had a problem with you guys putting wells on our property, which I said absolutely not. I've worked with Weston Sampson in the past myself, as at the water district. So them going on our property is not a problem at all. And I'll open up for any questions they have for me.
Bruce, in your February 16th letter that was in our packet for this evening, your comment labeled number 2 talks about the floor drain closure performed in 1993. What is that?
The DPW at one point, the 8 used to drain into, I believe it was a common drain, where the whole garage used to drain into a floor drain and used to go right into the ground. And I think it was back in the 90s, I'm not sure the exact year, the town closed that drain and they put a wash facility in that tied into the Chelmsford sewer system. So that's part of his recommendations. They want to excavate some of that soil where the floor drains are. They want to excavate some of the soil that I just read tonight where the waste barrels were excavated. And they want to do some soil samples at those 2 sites. And I think they also want to do some soil samples, if I read it correctly, where the town's septic system was located on that property, just to see if there's any PFAS origin for those 3 sites.
Okay. And I don't know if this is a question for you or Paul or DPW, but in your item number 3 in your letter, you talk about buried drums like those found in 2008.
Yep.
So are there more drums there?
We don't know. As far as we know, they removed the 3 that were there. And I think they did some type of ultrasound or some type of ground radar to see if they could find more barrels at the time, and they didn't find any more. Paul would probably know better than I did, because we were forbidden to go on their site in 2008. So we were kind of left out of the loop back then.
Yeah, Steve, I don't know if you want to comment on that work back then, but basically I think it's as Bruce described it. You know, the wells were discovered and it was reported, and then they did some testing to see if there were any additional wells, and at that time there were none found. But Steve's on right now.
Yeah, no, you're correct. When they were discovered back in 2000, summer of 2008, there was obviously contact with DEP and another environmental firm come out. Soil was sampled, groundwater was sampled. Obviously, at that time, people didn't even know what PFAS was. So I think in like everybody else here, I got that thing and forwarded along at 5 o'clock or whatever time it was from DEP. So they're just recommending some additional testing at that location. So we have good documentation on that. So
What was in the drums in 2000?
They were assumed, from my memory anyway, that they were waste oil drums or oil drums that were just thrown in a hole whenever, years ago.
And so the process that you're going through now with the DEP, is that eventually going to lead to, the intent is that it's eventually going to lead to understanding where the source of the contamination is?
Correct.
I think Virginia is going to be a combination of a few things. They're going to excavate those 3 sites, hopefully, eliminate those possibilities. And then they're going to probably follow the groundwater and see which way the groundwater is traveling. And then they're going to put a series of wells in, I would think, to try to discover the size of the plume and where the plume's originating from.
Yep. So
it's a matter of process elimination.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I'm reading. Like you said, like Steve said, I just got this myself, and I haven't involved with the peer review, but I just read the whole thing tonight, these 3 pages.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments? So we'll, the next report is Chelmsford Telemedia Executive Director Pete Padula.
Okay. Hello. You should have gotten this information in your packet. I think you did. I saw that. It's fairly straightforward. It was brought to my attention maybe a year and a half to 2 years ago by an accountant, Garth Ashbaugh, who works closely with PEG Access across the country. He's been one of the advocates for PEG Access, and he had noticed that Comcast had changed their accounting practices to GAAP accounting, and maybe was shortchanging us on our franchise fees. So we took him up, as did a number of other stations around Massachusetts and across the country, to do an audit to let us know if that were the case. You see that in October of last year, we got the results of the audit, and it is indeed the case that because of their accounting practices, we are sort of behind by 16 plus 8, ish, $24,000 for the years 2018 and 2019. That was the only 2 years that were studied. So it's a little unclear as to how to go forward, but except for the first step, which is clear. So we did work with our attorney, Peter Epstein, Paul and I did, and Peter Epstein is the attorney that does, if you don't know, he's the attorney that the town uses for cable contract negotiations. And we came up with this demand letter, which needs to be issued by the issuing authority, which is you guys. And all it really states is that we're aware of what's going on, and we would like them to make good on the shortfall, because it will be going forward. This is probably the beginning of a very long and perhaps fruitless process, but we need to begin, and that this is the beginning. So.
Pete, the draft letter
Mhm.
says that they're not going to address, we don't want to address interest right now. We'll calculate it later, but it looked like the accountant's report had calculated interest, or was that just an estimate and not a firm calculation?
So I'm gonna, yeah, I don't know how firm his calculation was, but I think it was, and Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was the lawyer's decision to not address that right now, to just simply point out that the fact that what is happening right now, and we'll go forward from there. That's the best I know on that.
And was that the same with the, I noticed too, it says, you referenced that the same issues probably exist for 2020 in the letter, but the letter doesn't ask for any affirmative response back from Comcast saying we acknowledge that something needs to change for 2020. We just make a statement. So was that intentional too?
Well, the letter should say, and I don't, that we
It
know
says
that
the town was advised to expect continued reductions for 2020, 2021, and thereafter.
Right.
But it doesn't actually ask Comcast to acknowledge that back to us. It just says that we have an expectation. So the only action this letter is asking for is, in my understanding, is just to make us whole on the previous fees, less interest. Is that correct?
I think that's correct. And I guess we're not demanding them to change their accounting practices, which is probably not going to happen anyway, but
it's in the conclusion of the next to the last paragraph. It says the must be corrected for the calculation of future license fee payments to the town of Chelmsford.
Okay.
So I think that's the hope. And the other leverage we have, because this is new ground, is that we are now coming up to license renewal in the next 3 years. So, that's sort of the leverage ultimately that the town has over Comcast and Verizon, because there's really no case law or practice regarding this matter, which may be of dispute, as Pete's noting.
So Paul, we're back to my other question, the interest in the late payment fees. Are we just totally deferring that, or do you expect to go back at them with that as well?
Well, again, it was on the advice of counsel that we put the interest issue aside, because you would then get into perhaps a long discussion of what would be an appropriate interest rate and whether interest rates are due. So, like you said, we're curious to see what their response is going to be, because we just don't have any evidence from other communities on this issue.
Yeah, we're a little bit ahead, although there may be others across the country. But I mean, not to be negative, but this is like going up against Goliath. This is Davy and Goliath. I mean, so we're just really beginning this process. Comcast, we have a long history with Comcast, and they're fairly set in their ways, and but we're going to begin now.
So Pete, are we okay with Verizon? Are they doing it the way they should?
So Verizon has not, there are no discrepancies that I've been made aware of with Verizon. So the thing with Verizon though is that in both cases, in general, the funds are declining just because of the nature of the marketplace. And Verizon actually held steady this quarter, but Verizon is not really supporting their TV business as much as Comcast. So I think we're seeing more people switching from Verizon to Comcast as Verizon doesn't keep up with all the bells and whistles that Xfinity or Comcast has. So.
And I think it's a 2-to-1 subscriber ratio, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, Verizon's relatively new to town anyway, right? I mean, Comcast has been here for 40 years, and Verizon maybe 5.
Yeah. But everything changed so fast, right? And so Verizon's really pushing 5G, which will be which is intended to be wireless video delivery at some point. So I think they're sort of backing out of wired TV delivery. So that's the word anyway.
Pete, since we're talking about funding, I wonder if maybe you could give the community a little bit of a brief review of that email that you sent out earlier last week
Yeah.
about how it might change and how maybe some advocacy we could possibly do.
Sure, I'd be happy to. We had a great response from the community on that, and also from Chelmsford's 3 reps, Gouveia, Howard, and Arciero. Arciero has already co-signed. Let me back up in case people aren't aware. The world is changing and people are receiving their TV content via the internet and not via their cable box. The laws that were put in place over 30 years ago to fund us have not changed. So as people cut the cord, so to speak, we lose that revenue. What Mass Access, which is the public access advocacy group in Massachusetts, has done and did before the pandemic was to propose legislation at the state level where those funds would be not replaced, but maybe mitigated by fees on online content providers such as Netflix and Hulu. And the logic and the rationale for the legislation is the same, because Netflix, regardless of the fact that it's over the internet, they're still using public rights of way to make a profit. It's a private company using a public right of way to make a profit. So this legislation was proposed before the pandemic, and then because of the pandemic, it got shelved for understandable reasons. But it's come back, and we have been asked and willingly accepted the challenge of trying to get our communities to get our legislators to support it. The letter I sent out met with a good response. The community, so Jim Arciero, who was a co-signer of the legislation in the first round, has already co-signed. Tammy Gouveia was a co-signer of the first round. I have verbal from her office that they will co-sign. I have verbal from Vena Howard, who is the new rep, one of the new reps. And I'm not yet sure where Tom Golden is. Paul informed me that he's no longer on the chair of the communications committee, which could help. He was opposed to it the first time around. And I'm still trying to, so hopefully, if any of you are interested in pushing this, because it will help us. The net of the legislation is to give, to levy a fee for users of Netflix, Hulu, et cetera, and 40% of which will go to public access facilities, 40% will go to municipalities, and 20% will go to the state's general fund. So it is a fee, for using those rights of ways. And just to pick up where I didn't finish, Senator Barrett, I'm not quite sure where he is. So Senator Barrett and Representative Golden are still the ones where we need to sort of make some contact. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. I know it's kind of a mouthful, but.
Is that something that perhaps should be done on the federal level as opposed to the state level?
Well, yeah, I mean, with the prior, the good news with the change in administration is that Ajit Pai is no longer the FCC chair. He was very much not friendly to things like public access. The new chair, and I can't remember her name right now, she's been a supporter of public access. Yeah, I mean, if that could happen at the federal level, and I don't know enough to know about how or if, but certainly, yeah, that would be great. But mass access is a great, the problem, Pat, at the federal level is that a lot of states don't even have public access because they just don't. In fact, I would say more don't than do. So, you have really strong communities in Massachusetts and other states like Washington State, California, Minnesota, and pockets of large metro areas. But there's a whole bunch of states that just don't have it, so I don't know how much we could get for a federal push.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks for the update.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need a vote for Ken to sign this? Is that what you're asking for?
If that's the procedure, yeah, I do would like you guys to sign the letter so we can just send it off and get that process going.
Are you ready? Ken, are you ready for the motion?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. So I make a motion that Ken sign on behalf of the board on the letter to Comcast regarding the Chelmsford audit of the Comcast license fees as presented.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, Pat,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Virginia,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye. Pete, if you send me an email, we'll find a time for me to sign that.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for that. And when we get to the other topic, bring me in because I do have a new option for you guys on the Zoom bombing mitigation.
At the end. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Chief Spinney talk about the Traffic Safety Committee monthly report and department updates. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, members of the board. Hope everybody's doing well. Let me see if I can share my screen. Oh, Mr. Chairman, are you going to do it or do you want me to do it?
I just
Well,
did it
Virginia's
unless
doing
you
it.
want control.
If I could have control, that might be helpful. I don't think it's going to let me.
Just give us 1 second. Pete, can you make,
You
Chief?
should- Chief,
There you go, Chief. You got it.
Okay. This ought to be interesting. Gotta find my desktop there. Bear with me. Okay.
Can't see anything.
All right.
Chief, do you have the document open?
Well, I have the. Oh, we're going to move on in a minute here. I have it popped up on my screen, but evidently you're not seeing it.
No, did you hit the share screen, the green button at the bottom of your Zoom
Yes.
window? Yeah. Maybe it's on your other monitor.
No, I only have one monitor going. All right, my apologies, I guess, Virginia, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So first is the traffic committee update.
Hang on a
Completed
second, Chief.
actions. I'm sorry?
I'm
Okay.
just trying to maximize it for you.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. The traffic committee project completed actions. We talked about some of these a few meetings ago. We completed the Westford Street and Dalton Road additional cautionary signage. So the DPW installed 25-mile-an-hour suggested speed limit signs. Those are those yellow cautionary signs as vehicles approach the intersection. There was some concerns from some residents that vehicles taking a left coming up Dalton Road, trying to take a left onto Westford Street, potentially hazardous. So we feel that additional signage will be helpful. Also, the 4 LED stop signs have been installed. School Street at Graniteville Road. I've received a lot of positive feedback. Obviously, that intersection has come into question the last few months, so that's great that those have been put in place. I drove through there not too long ago, and they were functioning. They were functioning well. New actions that the committee was working on a few weeks ago. We are asking the select board to approve the following: Lock Road signage to install a stop ahead sign before the curve. So we got some calls from a resident. So if you're on Lock Road approaching Westford Street, there was some concern of a line of sight that when you come around that slight curve, that the stop sign, if you were unfamiliar with the area, it might catch you by surprise. So the traffic committee is suggesting an additional sign, stop ahead before the curb. Also, Pilgrim at Graniteville, the request is to add a stop sign on Pilgrim at the intersection of Graniteville Road. We had an accident out there a couple weeks ago. I was actually surprised to find out that there is not a stop sign on Pilgrim Road as it intersects with Graniteville. We talked about this at our last traffic committee meeting, and everybody agreed there should be one there. There is one where Pilgrim intersects Old Westford Road. So that is Pilgrim Road is a significant cut through, especially during school months. So it is our recommendation that the board would approve the installation of a stop sign at that intersection. As far as future events, some residents have brought some concerns about Byam and Locust. That's that very narrow hill at that intersection. There's some line of sight issues there. And we're going to meet up there and try to come up with some ideas to make that a safer area. And the DPW is going to be addressing some parking signs in the center area. Our understanding is there's been some pretty consistent violations of the time restrictions of the parking of vehicles in front of those stores. Some of the signs are old, they're very old. And I believe Steve and Gary are on if they wanted to elaborate, but the plan was to go through that area and replace whatever needed to be replaced and make sure the signs are all consistent. Any questions about traffic?
And yet, Chief, I have a question. It has to do, I noticed that, particularly since you have the request for us to approve the stop sign there, there's some intersections I've noticed around town where there's not stop signs that I think they should. What should be the process? Send them to the traffic committee or to you?
No, I think, well, before we form the traffic committee, we usually come to the police department, but I think the traffic committee has been a great forum for this because it's great to get the input from the other departments that have to address these issues. So my recommendation would be if someone comes across a situation where they think one should be installed, they can forward it to any one of us, and then it'll be brought up at the next traffic committee.
Okay, all right, I'll do that. I mean, one in particular that I know of is at the end of Proctor Road when it comes to Acton Road. I mean, Proctor Road is also a very busy road, and there's none right there at Acton Road.
Okay.
And hasn't been as long as I can remember. So I don't know if it's, just somebody, was hit or something and never replaced, or if it never was there.
Well, I'll bring that up. The fact that you're letting us know now, I'll make sure we talk about that at our next meeting. So I'm sorry, Proctor at Acton?
Correct, yeah. Thank you.
I had a question. Paul, when you and Evan hosted the February 17th Route 3 interchange public forum, a number of residents kept bringing up different traffic issues around the 110 area. And I recall there was one street or one intersection in particular that came up several times. I can't remember the name of it, but is that anything that has been on the traffic committee screen, or would it be worth just capturing those few comments for the traffic committee to look at? Or
I
have
believe
them
that was
watch
Glen.
that?
I think that was Glen Avenue and Chelmsford Street. And that's been looked at in the past, and we'll continue to keep an eye on it, because of the volume of traffic, particularly large vehicle traffic that goes down Glen Avenue.
Mhm.
But yeah,
What was the concern with that intersection?
it's always been a tight intersection. And the bigger concerns were just the traffic congestion on Chelmsford Street with the traffic signals. But as we remind people, those are state-controlled roads, not local. And so we make the request to the state to look at the timing issues. But that was just a concern. Safety crossing, even by pedestrians in that area, they felt was challenging as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Virginia, are you able to advance to the next update on police operations?
I am, but do you want us to vote on Lock Road and Pilgrim first?
That probably would be.
Are we ready
Yes.
to do that? Okay. I will make a motion to approve the Lock Road stop ahead signage and the Pilgrim and Graniteville Road stop sign as presented.
We lost George.
Then I will second it.
I have a motion second. All in favor by roll call, Pat?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
I can,
And,
no, but my screen is black. Is everybody else's
oh,
screen
all
black?
right. No, we just can't see you, George.
Do you want to vote, George?
I voted for it, yes.
All right, and I'll vote aye. Oh, there you go, George.
Okay. Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got me on there now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, members of the board. So this next sheet, I just wanted to give a quick update as to police operations as it pertains to the pandemic. I know, months ago, we were doing some updates on some operations, and I felt that now would be a good time to just very briefly. Non-emergency reports are still being taken over the phone or online. This is obviously to try to maximize, or actually, to maximize on reduction of interaction between officers and members of the public. It's actually worked out quite well. It's streamlined a lot of our report taking, and I think it's been convenient for residents and business owners to be able to talk to an officer over the phone. In some ways, this has been faster. The online link to do this is on the town home webpage, and once the online form is filled out, it goes to an officer, and if need be, the officer will call the person back for more information. So we're continuing with that. The police facility lobby is open with restrictions. The police training room is open. Right now it's restricted to 10 persons. The firearms licensing is proceeding with delays. Several months ago, when the pandemic first hit back in, really March, April, May, I suspended firearms licensing for safety reasons for my detective because we didn't have the proper barriers in place. But that is up and running now. There are delays though, and the delays aren't our fault. There are delays on the state and federal level, but that is operating normally as far as our end. Patrol shifts are fully staffed at this time. The detective division is conducting investigations per normal operations. And our outreach clinician program is operational, and I'll be going into more detailed information on that in a second. Administratively, we are still exercising social distance policies at the police department. Roll calls at the start of all patrol shifts have been suspended. They're more or less occurring now via text, or the supervisor might meet the officers very quickly out the back of the building where there's more space. Cruises and equipment are being disinfected each shift. I am participating in regular meetings and updates with the town COVID-19 emergency management team, consisting of the town manager, the assistant town manager, the fire chief, board of health director. So that's been pretty consistent. And over the last several months, 21 members of the police department have been either quarantined or diagnosed with COVID-19. I am happy to say that as of today, I have no officers out. And again, all shifts are fully functional. As far as, I didn't make it, I should have put it on this, but I didn't. As far as primary enforcement of COVID-19 issues in town, it has been the Board of Health. But the police department has assisted in a number of occasions. Typically it would be if someone is uncooperative with a Board of Health inspector, or if there was an issue off hours. In some of those instances, Sue Roser has reached out to me. We've had a patrol officer go to a particular location. They've been business type situations that we have not been dealing with any private residence violations. But there's been a few occasions where we've had to send an officer out because of a complaint of someone not adhering to the governor's stipulations. Okay. Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I want to go through this form really take some time here because it is important. It's one of the It's one of the top priorities here at the police department. I often refer to this as our clinician outreach program, but the official name is our Frontline Initiative. And it's a regional police mental health collaborative, and we're probably in year 4 of this now. I know there's been a lot of talk of late of clinicians working with police departments, and I'm happy to say that this is nothing new for us here in Chelmsford. We have been expanding this program every year. It's going to continue to be a priority for us. So for those that are not familiar with the program, basically it's a collaborative between the 5 towns in our area: Tewksbury, Barica, Chelmsford, Dracut, and Tingsboro. We have a full-time director of this program that works with us and for us via a multi-town grant. And we have 2 full-time clinicians that are going to work with all 5 communities. So we have 1 clinician that's going to be assigned to Chelmsford, Tingsboro, and Barica, and another clinician will be assigned to the other 2 communities. So we're really looking forward to this taking off. We've been striving to have the clinician respond in real time. We have a mental health situation or somebody in crisis, whether it's telehealth or by phone or in person. Our goal is to have this clinician be as accessible as possible to assist the police officers, to assist the person that's having a crisis. So I just want to go through this very quickly. Our initiative has access to mental health clinicians, peer recovery coaches for those struggling with substance use, licensing drug and alcohol clinical interns. Services we provide: teletherapy, phone follow-up, individual and group recovery services, case management and referral services, access to crisis care, and general support. The Frontline Initiative is a regional police mental health collaborative comprised of Tewksbury, Barica, Chelmsford, Dracut, and Tingsboro, working in conjunction with various community behavioral health partners. Our commitment is to serve our communities and provide direct connection to behavioral health and substance use services in a whole person, trauma-informed way. Our focus is on supporting you, the community. Our approach to this is 3-tiered: prevention, crisis response, and recovery. Our programming in these key areas provide access to clinical staff, peer support, and educational opportunities to all members of the communities we serve, regardless of insurance, socioeconomic status, gender identity, sexual preference, age, race, and it is not a requirement that you deal with the police department. So this information is on our Facebook page. We've also put together a website. It's like a self-care type of website where you could access the website at your own, leisure. A lot of the resources pop up. We push that out through Facebook. This is going to continue to expand. We're really pleased with how it's going, and every year it gets better and more involved and more intuitive. So I just wanted to really highlight that because it's one of our top priorities moving forward.
So Chief, is this something that if Jen Melanson is dealing with someone with mental health issues, she could refer them into this program?
Yeah, so we created a wellness division in the department back in July, and I have a lieutenant that heads that up, and that lieutenant and Jen talk all the time. Some things are outside the collaborative and more geared towards Jen. Maybe, it could be a food shortage issue or someone in those type of needs. So Jen's been taking those. But when something gets brought to her attention, yeah, she reaches out. We bridge the initiative to work with her. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
So I wanted to go through some of our calls for calendar year 2020. The following information has been compiled from the department's record management system for calendar year 2020. Included with 2020 are comparison figures for the 2 prior years. The Chelmsford Police Department uses over 350 action codes to track calls for service, as well as all officer-initiated activity. So what's important to understand is whether the police department receives a call to respond to a location, or whether the officer himself initiates activity, a log entry is created and a case number is put into the system. So these numbers reflect everything. Everything that we do is tracked, whether the officer comes across it himself, whether it's a motor vehicle stop or suspicious activity or a parking issue, or if we get a call for service, please come to my house for this. A case number is created, a log entry is made. So these figures reflect that. So I certainly can go through the whole list, Mr. Chairman, but I was going to touch on a few things. And then certainly there's any questions. The total calls, the first one is pretty much in line with last year. We've had a lot of ebbs and flows. Some things were down, some are up. Some officer initiated activity was down in some areas, some were up. So as a result, the total police activity is pretty close. Obviously, the pandemic for 2020 has impacted so many of our calls for service this year. It's really a year like no other, as I'm sure we can all appreciate. You know, a good case in point is our arrests were probably half of what they usually are. A lot of factors with that. Shoplifting was down. A lot of crimes were down, believe it or not. So that's why you see a drop in persons arrested. A good thing is motor vehicle accidents are down. They were down over 30%, from 794 in 2019 to 557 in 2020. Motor vehicle stops, down significantly from the year before. Moving to the next page, medical calls, down 34%. A lot of reasons for this. One of them is the police department, as far as curtailing some of our exposure, and because of the lack of PPE at the beginning of the pandemic, we had to pull back from some of the medicals. These were, in most cases, non-emergency medicals. We still respond to anything involving life or death emergencies, but we did pull back from responding to non-life-threatening medicals. That's part of the reduction. Another reason is they were just down. Those first few months of the pandemic, and I think Fire Chief Ryan will agree, the medicals were down. The mental health calls, while they look down from 304 to 251, the fact of the matter is that particular code, while it looks promising, like oh wow, the mental health is down, not really. That particular code refers to a call that comes into the police department with regards to someone having a mental health crisis and they were transported to the hospital. In reality, mental health is factoring into many calls of service that we go to. Well-being checks, disturbances, domestic disturbances, all of them have had a nexus of a mental health component. And quite frankly, it's very difficult to track just how much mental health issues are factoring into these calls. But as you know, as positive as that number looks, where it's lower, in reality, in my opinion, mental health is a larger factor now than it's been in many years. So again, very difficult to track, but we're seeing it in a lot of different calls. Our overdoses, our opioid overdoses are down 27% from 40 to 29. A couple things in play there. I think some of our programs and initiatives have started benefiting, paying off. The other factor is during the pandemic, there's less likelihood of people being home alone. So I think that played into it. I think it played into it a lot. We had 3 overdose fatalities as opposed to 2 in 2019. Our well-being checks were up significantly from 572 to 675. We went to a lot of calls this year where people were reaching out to us saying, can you please check on so-and-so? He just sent me a text that he's thinking about taking his life. A lot of depression issues, a lot of well-being checks based on people exhibiting signs of depression. So that was up. Our overall disturbance calls towards the bottom of the sheet, up from 415 to 505. I can't remember a year we've had more disturbance calls involving people openly fighting at places of businesses. We went to a number of businesses in the Drum Hill area for what came in as people out in the parking lot assaulting one another. Our domestic disturbances are down slightly. However, domestic assault and batteries are up. Assault with dangerous weapons stayed about the same at 14. We had one assault with a firearm earlier in 2020. That was actually a firearm being discharged during an argument. We had 5 officers arrested in 5 officers assaulted in 2020. We had an uptick in restraining and harassment order services, up from 72 to 96. Down near the bottom, we had 2 robberies. These consist of our banking institutions. We had several unarmed robberies where notes were handed to tellers, that type of scenario. No injuries. One of them made a lot of headlines. It was a subject on a motorcycle that was hitting a lot of areas in our region. He got apprehended in Tewksbury not too long after he robbed the Chelmsford Bank. Our burglaries are up slightly from 18 to 24. It's important to note that these do not involve dwellings that were occupied at the time the break occurred. These were unoccupied homes or businesses, and we had 24 of those. Motor vehicle thefts up from 17 to 25. Again, most of these revolve around rental and leased vehicles not be returning at the proper time. However, several of them did involve, residents' vehicles being stolen off the property. In most cases, keys were left in them. Big thing here to stick out is the fraud. As you can see right there, up 290%. 2019, we had 167 fraud reports. In 2020, we had 664. And that was really all the unemployment fraud that I'm sure everyone's heard about that went crazy really across the country, but Massachusetts got hit particularly hard. A lot of unemployment fraud and PPE fraud, personal protective equipment fraud. People got taken on that quite a bit, where people would advertise, masks and gloves and whatnot. It was completely fraudulent. So quite an uptick there. School resource activity, that's up slightly from the year before. Since we started our hybrid learning model, the school resource officers have gone to a lot of residents to help students with various issues. So that's why there's a slight increase there. Our hate and bias offenses saw an increase in 2020 from 1 to 7. We had some vandalism and some thefts that we classified as hate due to the subject that was due to the item that was either damaged or stolen. And foot patrols and property checks. So that's a large number. So that's officers doing self-initiated foot patrols and property checks. And the reason that jump was at the start of the pandemic, we had a lot of issues with people not conforming to the governor's social distancing rules and whatnot, and they were doing so on town properties. So we had to, we were pretty much every shift, multiple times a shift, checking on and conducting foot patrols at our town properties. High school was a problem. And that's the ones I highlighted. Unless there's another question on any of the other figures, I'd be glad to answer.
Jim, Chief, do you want to talk about the issues you've been having with the hotels?
Yeah, I don't know if the board is aware or not, but the Best Western, and I think it was the Holiday Inn for some time also, but now just the Best Western has become the owners of the hotel have basically allowed those hotels to home a number of homeless populations from our region. And it has become a very dangerous situation for us. We have been out there for a number of assaults, overdoses. There's been speculation of prostitution. There's been weapons found there. So it got bad a couple of months ago. So we reached out to the director that oversees these programs, and they have told us that they're going to try to clamp down on these activities and hold these people accountable to not let them participate in the program when they don't follow the rules. And there was even talk of hiring their own security. That's yet to materialize. But you know, it's just something that the public is unaware of this, that we are dealing with people from all over the region that are really taking advantage of this system and this opportunity to be in shelter. And we've had assaults occur. Nearby businesses have been threatened by some of these individuals staying at these locations. So it's been problematic, but we're trying to get a handle on it with the people running the programs, but it's been somewhat frustrating, I'll be honest.
Chief, in the same way, you know, if you're a resident and your security alarm goes off after a couple of trips, they get charged. Is there any way you can start charging the hotel owner for calls to the property? Because my understanding is you're getting tons of calls to those properties each shift, and you know, you're just pulling cars that should be doing other things in town.
Yeah, the problem is though, the call, it is a legitimate call. They're legitimate disturbances. In fact, I mean, to your point, they're serious. But that's a good question. I don't see how we could do that. Whereas what I've tried to do is I've tried to promote them hiring some security details of police officers to supplement the hotel security. So an officer will be there, hopefully would act as a deterrent. They weren't receptive to that initially. And they said they were going to hire their own uniform security that would be on premise. So my understanding is that has not occurred. So we're going to circle back and try to address that. The most we can do is just try to apply pressure with the I believe it's a federal level person that's overseeing this. We've already voiced to her our concern and that something's going to happen over there. There's been some pretty bad assaults. I believe we had a fatality overdose 2 weeks ago. There's people going there that aren't even signed up for the program, that are staying there with someone else who is. So that's been a problem. We don't even know who these people are. So yeah, it's been a problem.
Excuse
Paul,
me.
It's the same, hold on one second, George. It's the same owner that owns, you know, all four of these hotels. When they come in front of us for licensing, do we have any sort of, you know, leg to stand on as far as not granting an entertainment license or alcohol license? Or
It's hard because they're doing it under federal and state funding. And in fact, as you know, the Board of Health has acted in the past because these hotels weren't built and constructed and established for a long-term stay. But the problem is with the pandemic, under the emergency regulations, those, you know, the rules and regulations are waived. So in essence, you know, it's meeting a community need. The problem is it's very difficult to, you know, because what the owner is going to say is, well, I'm meeting the need of the community and helping out. And obviously he's going to say he can't be responsible for the actions of the people that are placed there. So, you know, that's where we're trying to work as cooperative as we can, but, you know, we can't threaten somebody's license over, you know, working under a state and federal, you know, funding source to provide shelter during a pandemic.
And clearly we can't not respond also.
Right.
So it's been a problem because, like you said, it's taking up a lot of resources, and in these calls, some of them have been very serious. So we'll keep on it.
Thanks, Jimmy. I did hear a lot of complaints about, not a lot of complaints about foot traffic during the night up and down Chelmsford Street. You have a lot of calls on that.
Yeah, well, I've suspicious activity, and we had about 2 weeks ago, someone from there walked into a nearby business and basically threatened to assault some of the clerks inside. So, you know, it's difficult to even find these individuals once they leave the area.
Yeah.
Nobody has a name. Again, many times there's people that are staying with people that are registered for the program that aren't even supposed to be there. So there's a lot of abuses taking place.
Thank you.
All right, let's mark forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll turn it over to the fire chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, board members. Good evening, Mr. Manager. Can you allow me to share the screen? I don't have the screen sharing ability. Does somebody want to present?
Yeah, just
for
give
the
us
slide?
1 second.
Okay,
You should have it now, Chief. It takes a
okay,
second.
got it. There we go. And thank you for presenting this, allowing me the opportunity to provide an update for my department. In the current operating budget, fiscal 21, we are currently operating with 60 uniform members. One position, however, is currently vacant. As you may recall, last year during the pandemic budget cuts, we had a 5% cut to our budget. At the time, we had 4 unfilled vacant positions. I have since filled most of those positions. And going forward, I will have some more retirements. Fiscal 22 is my intention when I submit my budget to restore all vacant positions. With that said, however, we are projected to lose 4 members this year, 1 a disability retirement, and 3 firefighters will be reaching the mandatory retirement age of 65. Again, if you have any questions, please jump in and ask your questions. When all the positions are filled, we will have 52 firefighters assigned 4 groups or units, as we call them. Each unit is managed by a company officer. We have 2 captains in the fire prevention office, 1 in training, and support staff, giving us 63 and a half employees. This is kind of my public service announcement. For those who are interested in joining the department, there's some major changes that the State Civil Service Office will be implementing this year. The first change will be the test date will be moved from its traditional spring date in March to the fall in October. So in turn, the new eligibility list, which is the list that we hire from municipalities, will be made available to the town in March 15th. But perhaps the biggest change, and for the first time, Civil Service is going to allow an annual retake option. So if a test taker is not satisfied with their score, they will now have the option to retake the exam the following year. And what Civil Service will do is they will merge and reconcile a new list for us. So the list I'm operating on the first year may be different than the list I operate on the second year. And again, this list is typically good for 2 years. Looking at comparable departments, we've looked at this before. When you take a look, Chelmsford and Billerica are the only communities with more than 3 stations. Of note, when you look at Andover with the similar sized population, they have more square miles they cover. They operate out of 3. Westford, slightly smaller in population, more square miles they cover. They operate out of 3. And again, Marlboro, pretty similar in size. In terms of square miles, they operate out of 3. When you try to compare budgets, it's a little more difficult than comparing apples to apples because some of these budgets have an EMS component built in to the operating budget. And if you look at the Reading Fire Department, the town of Reading has centralized all their vehicle and maintenance operations under the town. So the fire department doesn't have that built into their operating budget. Again, if you have any questions, just jump in.
Chief,
Yes.
I'm sorry, on that previous chart, what does ALS and BLS stand for?
BLS is basic life service. ALS is advanced life service, like paramedics.
And so if it doesn't say private, those are organic to within the town?
So for instance, Westford runs 2 ALS, 2 paramedic units.
Okay,
Borica runs a town-wide ALS service.
Chief,
Go
and
ahead.
these other towns that only have 3 stations with their comparable sizes and mileage, how are their response times compared to ours?
I would say our response time, because obviously we have the 5 stations, our response times are probably better. I would say the same with Borica. It all depends on what each community looks for in terms of the service level. Some will sacrifice a little bit of response time to have more firefighters on the truck. And that's the discussion that we're currently going through right now.
Which makes a little bit of sense, because otherwise you'd have to wait for a second unit to get there, which would take a lot longer than if you had one with, maybe 3 or 4.
It's that, well, that's true. I mean, the response, but when you have an issue, especially now that we're an OSHA state, they're going to look at fire responses in particular, not medical, fire responses in particular, and they'll look at how many firefighters arrived with the first unit to try to meet that 2 in, 2 out requirement that we've talked about before. Any more questions on this? Okay, taking a look at our 10 years of calls. No surprise here, not unexpected. Our call volume has decreased significantly from last year. Not only has it decreased significantly from last year, but the overall 10-year average of 6,368 responses. And no surprise, businesses were shut down, restaurants were closed, less cars on the road as more people were working remotely from home. When you've seen the spikes, you've seen them in 2014 and again in 2018, those years had significant weather events, which drove our call volumes up. Taking a look at 2019 and 2020, although we had fewer structure fires in 2020, sadly, we had a loss of life at the Kinlock Apartments on May 1st. A 58-year-old woman perished in that fire. And probably within weeks, we had another fire at the Chelmsford Commons, which is the mobile park. A total loss of a unit. Both fires were the result of smoking materials. Going down the list, vehicle fires were down. Unauthorized burning kind of surprised me, jumped out, but I probably could attribute that to more people were home projects, more yard work. Chief Spinney talked about medicals. Medicals were down. Taking a deeper look at medicals, in 2019, we averaged 293 medicals per month, or about 10 a day. But in 2020, we averaged 266 medicals, or 9 per day. The outlier here is April. April, at the height of the pandemic, our medicals dropped to 194 in town. These medicals didn't go away. And I don't have a clear explanation as to why. My sense from talking to people, from actually talking to patients, I think some were concerned about picking up the phone and dialing 911 and leaving their homes during a pandemic. Going down the list, Chief Spinney talked about motor vehicle accidents were down. Our alarm responses down. Investigation calls were up slightly. Mutual aid, our responses outside of Chelmsford were slightly down. We went to Lowell 6 times, Borica 5, and Tingsboro 2. You may recall back in November 2019, Criterion Associates did an analysis of 3.5 years of our response data, which indicated stations 1, 2, and 3 were the busiest stations, and 2020 was no different. Engine 1 was obviously the busiest station, which comprises of our Engine 1, our ladder and rescue, followed by 2 and 3. The outlier here is Engine 4. Engine 4 in East Chelmsford, Engine 4 has always had more responses than the South Fire Station. However, during a pandemic, due to quarantine issues and apparatus issues, on occasion, we've had to close that station down. That box that you see, the red box, is the Gainwell Master Box. And what that is, it's a telegraph machine that was developed in Boston in the 1850s. And the company Gainwell actually formed after the Civil War and put it into commercial use. So this box here you see on all the schools, all the public buildings, and it's on most commercial buildings within town. And the way this system works is when you have a device that activates, like a smoke detector, it will send a signal to the fire alarm panel. In turn, it will send the signal to this red box, the Gainwell box, outside the building. It will actually send out a code. So this box is 26. It will tap out a code, and you see the mechanisms on the picture below. It'll tap out a 2, and then it'll tap out a 6. It'll send 4 of those rounds along a red cable along the telephone wires to all 5 fire stations into the 911 dispatch center. Chelmsford first installed this system in the 1920s. And at its peak, we've had over 300, probably closer to 400 boxes in town. However, due to age and reliability concerns, we started the process in July of 2019 to convert the system over to a central station system. So the last conversion happened a couple months ago in December. So I'd like to take the time to thank all our customers, to the business association out there, because they worked with us to make this happen. So again, my thanks to all. And I know it was a little difficult the last couple of months due to the pandemic. So we did extend our timeline. So again, thank you to all who were involved.
Chief,
Yes.
these boxes, are they all removed now?
No, they're not. We just
Okay.
sent out notices this past week that they can start removing the boxes. And we're not going to mandate it at this time, obviously, because budgetary issues that our businesses are facing, but if they're going to be going for a renovation, the boxes will have to come off. And at some point, these boxes will have to come off. But I'm trying to work with the business association, our customers, to limit the impact.
Okay, I mean, I was just curious if they still work. I mean, if somebody sees that box and there's a fire and they go to, to pull the lever down, will it work?
No, it will not work.
Okay.
It will not work. So coronavirus and the impact to the Chelmsford Fire Department. March of last year through Thanksgiving, we've only had 2 members on the department receive positive test results. We did fantastic. And this is largely a result of the safeguards that we put into place and our members working together to address issues as they came up. And I can't thank my members enough for addressing the issues as they appeared to keep us safe. However, Thanksgiving came along, and through January, we had 12 firefighters and 2 staff members in that short period of time became positive. And that really, the Chelmsford Fire Department reflected the community spread that we saw, not only in Chelmsford, but throughout the state and actually throughout the nation. From March 2020 through January, we used 243 shifts were involved to quarantine our members to keep them safe. 49 members of the department have received their COVID vaccinations, both of them, so 82%. So I am very happy to report that. And for the COVID vaccination training, 24 of our members, along with 9 police officers, have taken the training. Not only have they taken the training, but they've started to utilize these skills already in our community COVID vaccination clinics. And it is my hope that the state will rethink their position and pivot back. I think Director Sue Roser does a fantastic job. Sue Roser and her team, they've shown that they can run successful, effective clinics. And if you talk to the residents who have gone through, they would agree. So it is my hope that we will be able to continue our training, inoculate our residents locally. Hopefully the state will allow us to do, and Director Sue Roser do what she does best. Unfortunately, sadly, we lost 91 members, 91 members to COVID last year. No surprise, at the height of the pandemic in April, we lost 31. And then you can see when we had the fall surge, the second surge, the fall into the winter, we started to pick back up. COVID deaths. Now, this data that you see here is only as of January 6th of this year. What jumps out at me is the number of females. 51 of the patients that have died were female. And as you may recall, at the height of the pandemic, Back in April, Paul Manor lost a staff member and she was in her 60s. I know Chief Spinney went over the overdose data. Taking a look at 10 years of where we were into today. Our largest annual increase happened in 2014 to 15. We had an 83% increase. The largest decrease happened recently in 2018. We had a 23% decrease. And Chief Spinney just mentioned the decrease that we had within this past year. Most of our patients for overdoses were male, 72%. Average age, male, 34, female, 37. The worst month in our 10 years, September 2017, we had 9 overdoses. Response locations, most of our responses occurred in the North Chelmsford area. 50% of our calls were at a private dwelling. Friday was the most common day for response, 7 p.m. the most common time. In the breakdown of our patients, were Chelmsford residents, followed by Lowell, Borica, and then Nashua. Again, if you have any questions, just let me know. And to conclude this presentation, Chief Spinney went over the numbers. However, what jumps out at me here is of the 29 that we had last year. If you go back to 2019, August was the worst month. We had 7 overdoses. And as you can see here, we had none in August. So that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman. If you have any questions, I will try to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Chief?
I don't, but thank you, Chief.
Yeah, I will tell both chiefs. I got a lot of feedback throughout the pandemic, especially in just the last maybe 4 or 5 months. Both your teams have done fantastic jobs. So thank you for your staff and police officers and the fire personnel for everything they did. It was amazing to keep everybody as safe as we did and with the success that you did. So good job.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Paul, we'll move on to the town manager bid reports.
Yeah, that's probably an appropriate transition. The bid award this evening is for the reconstruction of the North Chelmsford Fire Station. We have members of the Permanent Building Committee here, notably Chief Ryan and Gary Persichetti, our Public Works Director. We're seeking the board's confirmation made through and by the Permanent Building Committee for the bid award for the reconstruction of the North Fire Station. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Gary Persichetti, who can sort of walk you through the process. Gary, please.
Sure. Good evening, Board and Manager Paul Cohen. I put in your packet some pages. The first one is the memorandum of the award that we are looking for. The next page is a non-price evaluation that was done by the 5 members. And then following that gives you the criteria and each one of the categories that we had asked to be looked at. So with that said, and with the finalization of this, we are asking for the award to Triumph Modular for the amount of $3,136,244, which is in our budget. And it's also a company that we just worked with 3 years ago to do all 4 elementary schools for portables. They've also done some other work in town, and their references as well come in, highly recommended.
So who is our new select board liaison to this committee?
I believe that's me.
Do you vote?
No.
Oh, that's not a voting one? Okay.
No.
Gary, I just, it had kind of a, I guess, high level question. So I'm just looking at like the scoring matrix with the A's and the HAs. And like, for example, on some of them, it seems like it's either a yes or a no. It's pretty binary. It's not subjective, and yet there's like different people voted different ways. But the one that jumped out at me was number 10, which is the bidder will include all analysis and design calculations within 30 days. And according to the rating system, the HA says yes, they will. And the only other option is a UA, which is they won't. So I wasn't sure what A meant.
Well, a lot of it depends on if you're familiar with doing these rankings,
Mm-hmm.
then what happens a lot is people have a little bit of a different take, and people have a tendency to rank higher than others. And that's not uncommon, depending on what you're used to and how you read into an RFP and what you're reading as far as when you go into the criteria of the actual proposal that they send back and look at that and say, well, what are they giving me? You know, what am I getting for this? And that's not uncommon. And that's the reason why what happens is all 5 members of this committee come to that one meeting with their scores already done. And then this list is made from that. And there is discussion as well, sometimes when rankings are quite different.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
So Gary, when would they begin work if their contract is awarded?
Well, usually by tomorrow, after you guys approve, Paul usually lets me know that we can send them the letter of intent. And then all the forms have to get moving. The insurance forms come out, the actual AIA document that has to be signed. So that stuff's probably a good 3 to 4 weeks between back and forth with them and us and the lawyers. But in the meantime, what we will do is with that letter of intent, we will have our kickoff meeting. We will start to go through the individual drawings, come up with any questions or comments we have to what they put in front of us. Which we will start on right away. So physically, we will start as early as probably Tuesday or Wednesday of next week with these types of things happening. And then based on the fact that we turn around, we do our final evaluations of drawings and approve them, then that gives them the ability to set the factory going, you know, to do the preparations and start making the pods. And then in the meantime, we will continue with, you know, getting set up temporary housing, getting the station itself closed, and, you know, prepping it all so that they can physically take over the building. As you know, this is scheduled to end sometime in October, towards the end of it now, because we are running about 11, 12 days behind the schedule that we thought we would, which is not uncommon because there's a lot of work. And then there's the meetings like this one, you have to hit the next one that comes up. And it just so happened that the day we opened a bid was a meeting, and there's no way you'd be able to do your evaluation and bring it to you that fast.
Okay, so we can look for a ribbon cutting around Halloween.
Yeah, I would think that if we stay on track, you should be. The other thing that does happen with this sometimes is depending on conditions that we have, meaning not just winter conditions, but, you know, heavy rains and all of that. If that's less than we anticipate, then we usually pick up days.
Okay.
If possible, can bring the schedule in a little earlier, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Gary, why do you think we only received one bid?
Well, first of all, it's a modular. So there's a few companies out there that can do it. I could tell you that we had about 22 people that came to the site walkthrough. Why that happens is some people, mostly demolition companies, they come to give their card to these actual people that would be doing the job to, you know, hopefully at least win the part of that. We had 3 or 4 electrical houses. We did have one other modular company. Out of that one day that we have, which was mandatory, We did get one list of questions, and a couple of them had to do with timing. And I think there was a little bit of an issue with the timing with one of the companies, and I would imagine that's why they decided not to submit.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Are you ready for a motion, or are there more questions?
I think we're ready for a motion.
I will make a motion to approve the bid award for the North Fire Station renovation to Triumph Modular as presented.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. All in favor by roll call. Pat,
Aye.
George,
aye.
Virginia,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
So we'll go to the town warrant.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm presenting for you this evening the warrant for this 2021 spring annual town meeting. It went out in the packet that was posted on Thursday, and then over the last couple of days, meaning Friday, and then finally this morning, Town Council Paul Haverty and Steve Youngley from DPW worked out a couple of enhancements to the language on the two easement articles, just to make it more descriptive and inclusive. But basically, we have a 42 article warrant, which again is essentially what was presented to you at your last meeting 2 weeks ago. It's been thoroughly reviewed by Town Council, and at this point, it's complete for your signatures, and then we're off and going. And Finance Committee is already scheduling and holding their hearings, and we'll continue on the path per usual. It's a long warrant, though. It's 42 articles, and some of them with the general bylaw and zoning bylaw changes are quite lengthy. So it will be a big book this year.
Well, I have two questions on Articles 34, 35, and 36. It has to do with easements.
Yes.
It says said easement exhibit plan and the associated easement agreement is attached to this warrant. Is that just a formality, or?
Yeah, the warrant that it will go out. So when we send out the warrant, you will see an easement plan that shows the sidewalks, on Turnpike Road, that shows the area on Dunstable and Ledge Road, the intersection, and so forth. So that all gets posted with the warrant, and it's also available in the clerk's office, so that people can either look at it online if they want to see a physical copy of the plan, like the easement one on Turnpike Road goes from the intersection at Billerica Road all the way down to to Warren Avenue. That's a lengthy distance, so it's kind of hard to see, unless sometimes people want to see it in person. But short answer is yes, we include the attachments with the warrant at the back of the warrant when it's posted, and it's also published with the book when the book is printed and online.
Okay, and the other question I had was Article 41. It says it's submitted by you. Shouldn't that have been a planning board submission or not?
Yeah, but it's a general bylaw, and technically the planning board didn't bring it forward. I'm the one who came up with the concern that, well, wait a minute, if you're going to change, and that's why I put it after the articles, that if the town meeting were to vote to approve the amendments to the cannabis or marijuana zoning bylaws, then we would then have a general bylaw that's in conflict, because you may recall when the town implemented the prohibitions, it was belt and suspenders. Well, now if this gets adopted, you don't want to have a general bylaw that's in conflict. And so the straightforward manner, and again, reviewing with town council, is I just put forth an article on there to just rescind the general bylaw prohibition, which isn't necessary if you've got the zoning bylaw that's been voted by the town meeting by a two-thirds vote to allow those type of uses. So that's why I put it on under my name, because I didn't want it to be misleading where it would be the planning board, since the planning board technically did not submit that article.
Okay.
Would Article 41 also require a 2/3 vote?
No, general bylaws require only a majority vote, but if the other ones failed and this passed, it wouldn't have a material effect because the zoning bylaw would still be prohibitive. So again, it was done at the time to have sort of, at the recommendation of council, to have belt and suspenders prohibited under the zoning bylaw and then have a general bylaw that prohibited it. And so now, again, if we're going to open up that area to all forms of cannabis / marijuana activities aside from retail, non-medical, then there's no need for the general bylaw if that's what the town meeting does.
With the planning board still having public hearings on their warrant articles,
Mhm.
if they decide they want to change something, is their recourse is to bring it to the town meeting floor as an amendment?
Yes, and it can't be more expansive. It can only be within the expansion of this warrant, because the purpose of the warrant is to warn the residents in the community of what's going to be discussed at town meeting. So for example, if to the planning board hearings, they wanted to be more restrictive, like saying, oh, we'll allow cultivation, but we're not going to allow, R&D, then that can take place. But what you couldn't do is you can't allow for like retail sales, non-medical, because that's not what's called for in this warrant. So again, they can be more restrictive. They can't more liberalize it, because the reason for that would be a resident would say, well, wait a minute, you didn't notify us back in February that you were going to discuss, recreational sales. You told us you were doing everything but that. So that's the reason behind the state rulings and process. So yes, the planning board can be more restrictive. They can't expand and the scope of the article.
And that would apply to the use tables as well?
Exactly.
So I've had questions on those. Okay.
Exactly. So if they say if it's not allowed, you can't be out. You can't be out there, changing anything to people that you didn't warn them about.
But if there's something in the use tables that they make more restrictive, that's okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can see the idea behind it. You're basically always giving them a worst case scenario, i.e. worst case meaning most liberal type of expansion. And so you can always contract. But you can't go the other way and impose something where people say, wait a minute, when I got this warrant back in February, you weren't proposing this for my neighborhood. You now can't do that without fair warning. So that's what's taking place. So, and again, there are even amendments put on the floor of town meeting.
Well, I guess my question was, and the question that's been posed to me is, if the planning board decides they want to amend these articles under the restriction you just laid out, they have to do it as an amendment on the town meeting floor. There's no way to change it before town meeting.
Right. I mean, what often happens is when the planning board publishes when the finance committee publishes its recommendations, oftentimes the result of the planning board discussion with the finance committee, they may have amendments available at that time that will get published in the book, which is helpful because then the residents can see the text before it being just introduced on the floor of town meeting. So that would be in the form of the motion.
So you can still, after this warrant is signed, there still can be changes to the text?
There can be changes to the motion. In other words, so what'll happen is the warrant stands as presented, cannot be altered, but the finance committee report and recommendations could include the changes that they'll make under a motion, and therefore it's giving people more advanced notice. But the warrant, when the warrant is signed, it's in cement.
The changes, Paul, when you say the changes that they'll make under a motion, that the finance committee makes under a motion, that the submitter makes?
That the planning board would make under a motion.
Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, because what happens is when it gets to the floor of town meeting, the presenter has controls the motion, and therefore they may make changes from what's in the warrant, which obviously again would be more restrictive, but they can provide advance notice to the community of that in advance. And the best vehicle is via the website and the town meeting finance committee booklet that is published for the town meeting.
Okay.
And then the last resort would be an amendment on the floor of the town meeting, which can be brought forth either by the presenter or by any town meeting representative.
If no one has any other questions on the warrant itself, I just had something I wanted to bring up with Paul and the board regarding the scheduling in April. Because I was just looking at, this is a very, like Paul said, this is a very long warrant, and I was wondering if there may be any wiggle room to spread out, like we usually invite people to come present the warrant articles, but when I looked at the calendar, the elections are on Tuesday, April 6th.
Mhm.
And assuming we do a reorg meeting on like Thursday, the 8th, if we lock that in, the only Mondays that are left are 2 consecutive Mondays, April 12th and April 19th, before town meeting. So we don't, either we have to start reviewing the articles before the election, or I think we have to commit to having 2 meetings back to back on the 12th and the 19th, if we want to have a meeting where we have presenters come and then we have time to think about it and then we vote our recommendations like we usually do. Because there aren't 3, we don't have the every other week set of Mondays that we usually do with the election being so late.
But
Do you know
remember,
do you know what I'm saying?
right, but remember, because of the pandemic, it's expected that the town meeting sessions will be postponed until mid-June.
Well, I know, but what you can't, when do you decide that though?
Oh, well, I think it'll be discussed right after the election with the moderator. And what happened, as was the case last year, I think the chair of the board went down with the moderator after giving the community notice.
I understand that, Paul, but if it doesn't move, I think
Oh.
we have to plan on probably meeting for 2 Mondays in a row before the election.
Sure, but I would say,
or on starting to get briefings in March before the election. And
well, the problem with doing briefings before the election is you don't know who the board is. So
I know.
that's never been done. But the reality is, you're probably a 99% certainty town meeting is going to be postponed until April. The reason it's not done in this warrant is our bylaws specify the date for the spring annual town meeting.
I'm not
I think with
suggesting that it
COVID-
has to be done in the warrant. All I'm saying is,
Right.
if it doesn't change, there's a logistics thing that we as a board need to think about in terms of there's
Sure.
not enough Mondays to space it out like we usually do.
Well, and again, you could also meet other nights other than Mondays too. But I just don't foresee that happening. I think there'll be ample time between April and mid-June for the board to hear on the articles and make its recommendations at that time. But again, if it were to happen, then you're right. You could go consecutive Mondays, or you can go multiple nights in a week, or other means to provide sufficient time for information and deliberation.
This board has been known to have fairly lengthy meetings too, so.
I know.
Even though there are 42 articles, we could probably get through them in 2 5-hour meetings. Not that I'm proposing that.
So I'll make a motion to sign the 2021 spring annual town meeting warrant.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, Pat,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Virginia,
Aye.
and I vote aye.
Thank you. We'll get the warrant out with electronic signatures to the clerk and the constable and have it posted. Under my report, I just have 2 items this evening. One is the COVID-19 vaccination clinic update. I think it's pretty fairly well known what the governor and the administration have done in the last couple of weeks. As Chief Ryan noted earlier, I think many are hoping that there'll be a change in policy away from the prioritization and basically, directive towards mass vaccination clinics to local clinics among Board of Health. And I know there's a legislative hearing on Thursday. And I guess the simple thing is we'll be prepared to respond if the opportunity arises. The clinics at the local level have been successful. All of our doses have been distributed. We've got a second dose vaccine clinic scheduled for 400 people this Thursday in the town office's lower gymnasium, and we're just waiting for those second dose vaccines to be delivered tomorrow or Wednesday. And then there'll be a second. The only other clinic that would be after that is in a couple of weeks. There'll be a second dose for the clinic that was held last Thursday for first doses. And at that point, that would exhaust our activities. As Chief Ryan and Chief Spinney noted earlier, our police and fire followed the guidance from the state and did training on how to administer vaccines. The local boards of health, have demonstrated their performance. We've received positive feedback from residents, but the administration at this point has chosen a different path. And again, our biggest concerns are those people who are hard to reach and may not feel comfortable going to a regional facility. And we're working with the housing authority and others to have mobilized clinics to reach people in buildings as opposed to even bringing them out to the town offices. It's just been frustrating to say that the state's giving vaccines so they can get at a supermarket, but yet they're not providing vaccines to a local board of health. So again, it's out of our control, but I just would inform the board and the community. We've performed well. We're prepared to perform in the future, and we'll watch the debate and actions of the state going forward. If one thing we've known through this whole process is it changes constantly, and we'll be prepared when the opportunities arise in the future. And then the second thing on my report is on the redistricting. Sort of, again, more disappointing news. The U.S. Census Bureau informed the federal government and state and other local government officials that they're 6 months behind on the completion of the 2020 census. Originally, data was expected by the end of last calendar year in December. That didn't occur. Now they're talking that they may not have data for redistricting up until the end of September 30th. That can be troublesome because of many states' constitutions and other areas, require that the redistricting be completed by the end of the calendar year. You've seen it you may have read recently about the city of Lowell. They're going to have to proceed with the best information they have on their redistricting for their city elections that are taking place this fall, when it was hoped that they would use the new census data to, complete and current those precincts. So once again, in speaking to the town clerk and our GIS people, once we get data and we'll be responsive, we'll notify you as the board and the community. Because again, in order to build the building blocks of the statewide precincts and the congressional, you need to do the precincts at the local level. So just wanted to inform the board that, we're in a wait and see mode at this point. And as soon as we get data and we're able to respond, we'll provide it as soon as possible. And then the only other thing I would note that I did notify the board is on the state redistricting, one of our Representative Tom Golden, is on that committee. And obviously, we'll await any information we receive from him in terms of how the committee will proceed at the state level in the months ahead. So again, it's a little, but we're hearing, it's a little, disappointing, but yet we're hearing assurances from the Secretary of State and other state officials that they think, particularly in the technology that we live in today, that they can get this mapping and re-precincting drawn and done hopefully by the end of the calendar year. Because one of the goals is at the state level is, again, it's required to have it done, but also the idea is they'd like to have the people live in their precinct that they're serving a year in advance, if you're running for statewide office or congressional office. And then the other thing is that, it really won't affect Chelmsford until next year in 2022 annual town election, where basically all the town meeting reps would be up for re-election with the change in the precinct boundaries. So that's the update on redistricting this evening, Mr. Chairman. And then I do have two appointments for your confirmation. One is Elaine McDonald for an unexpired 3-year term ending on June 30th, 2021 to the Commission on Disabilities. And the other is Jeffrey Merrill for an unexpired term expiring on June 30th, 2021 for the Historical Commission.
I'll make a motion to approve the town manager appointments for Elaine McDonald to the Commission on Disabilities and Jeffrey Merrill to the Historical Commission for the terms presented.
I'll second those motions.
Motion second, all in favor? Yep, all in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to the review of the select board policies. Hope everybody had a chance to review sort of the notes and points that were made that were in the agenda. Pat, where you went through and did a lot of this, do you want to give a little overview of your policy review and update?
Okay, well, as you said, the note that I attached at the beginning of before the policies listed several things that I just, took the initiative and just changed with, I mean, these are things that we've talked about, changing the Board of Selectmen to Select Board, standardized everything in it, so the bullets and things like that and the font and the size are all consistent. It was amazing to me once I get into it. There must have been so much cut and paste, and there were formats, and there still are, as you can see as you look through it. Some of the places where it's been a challenge to try to make it right, but I'm getting there. I inserted the latest policies that we have done, and then other minor edits. And for tonight, I suggested that we talk about several of these that I also have on that list. I didn't want to go ahead and unilaterally make changes to those without the discussion from the board. So I don't know if you want to take those one at a time or how you want to do that, Ken.
We can go through them one at a time, I think. A lot of them are pretty quick, but I think in that approach, we can talk about them as we go.
Okay. And if it runs too late, we can always hold some over to the next meeting too. Well, first is the responsibilities of the board officers. On page 6, it indicates the responsibilities of the chair. I think those are pretty straightforward, and also the vice chair, just basically to act in place of the chair. The responsibilities of the clerk, these have been in place now for, over 10 years, since longer than that, since last time the policies had a comprehensive review. But as you look at those responsibilities, many of them are not always handled by the clerk. So I don't know if we want to remove them, if we want to leave them and enforce them. One thing in particular is the way that minutes are reviewed. When I was first on the board, the way the procedure worked was the recording secretary would first send the draft minutes to the clerk, only the clerk. The clerk would do the first pass through the minutes, making any updates or corrections, and then the clerk would send that version to the other members for any additional edits. And the hope would be that the clerk would pick up, get most of the edits, so there wouldn't have to be a lot of merging later. And then after that was done, the clerk would would send it back to the recording secretary, who would forward it to our administrative assistant to put it on the agenda. As you know, that's not the way it's done now. All of us have been getting the minutes. I know I've been making edits, and I know Virginia's been making edits. I don't know about the others. And then we send them back to Vivian, who has had to merge all of our edits, which I know is a challenge for her, and I'm sure for any recording secretary who would have. So, as I said, I don't know what we want to do about that. That might be something that I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about how to handle that in a better manner. But the other responsibility. Go ahead.
Sorry. Did you want thoughts on that now or later?
Sure. Yeah, we can do them one at yeah. Sure.
My thought is that I like that it's sent out to the whole board for comments, and I think it just, where everything's electronic now, I think it eliminates an extra step in the timeline of having this iteration with the clerk, and then having the clerk, who's a part-time volunteer, having to edit minutes. I think that just having the recording secretary send them out for comment works fine. I think, okay. and I think it's streamlined from what you just described. I can't imagine it doing that way.
Okay. All right, so I'll remove that responsibility then from clerk, basically. So the second responsibility was to record the minutes for all executive sessions of the board. As you know, I think in the past year, there's probably been 3 of us that have done executive session minutes. So again, it doesn't have to be that. It was just a thought that to have it be the expectation that you know, that person would do the minutes, just so that person knew going into an executive session that they needed to take good notes. So again, I don't know if we want to make that be an assignment that the chair makes at the beginning of the executive session on who's going to be doing them that time. I don't know how we would do that. So again, it might be something that we want to remove from the responsibilities of the clerk.
I like the idea, Virginia's idea of the whole board getting the you know, minutes and reviewing them, you know, making comments. That way, there everybody has kind of looked at it and, you know, had a chance to do it, you know, when they have free time on their own time, and that way they have to, you know, they can take their time, you know, and really, you know, pay attention as opposed to just saying, yeah, that's fine or whatever, you know, because they are very important. So
They are. They're the, as you say, the permanent record for what we do. So
right,
to be accurate.
right.
Pat, what you're asking about now is the second one that says recording the minutes for the executive sessions,
Correct.
which has not always been done by the clerk.
Right. Probably more often, not lately, probably more often not.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Another way to handle it would be to leave it as it says and just add unless the chair assigns somebody else in case
Okay.
of waiting circumstance.
Okay, that's a good idea.
I agree with that.
Okay.
And then what do you do with C? Because I don't think the clerk really reviews the executive session minutes to determine if they can be released.
Pat's been doing all that.
I have, because I've had the history of what the executive sessions were about. But yeah, that's, I think by law, it's supposed to be the chair or the chair's designee who does that once a year. So, I mean, again, we could leave that way and have it say, you know, or the chair can appoint somebody else to do that, you know, take that responsibility.
You mean just add it as an H under the chair, if that's what the law says? That they would designate someone?
Well, if it's in the policies, I don't know, I guess it could be argued that it has been assigned,
Oh, okay.
but either way, we could put it in H that the chair assigns somebody.
You could do the same thing with C as we did with B and just say unless otherwise designated by the chair.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Is there any way we can record, you know, the executive sessions? You know, that way.
I think that's a different topic than what we're talking about here, but I mean, I guess if you want to talk about that.
Well, I mean, if somebody has a disagreement with what was said, okay, I mean, you come back and listen to that portion of it, and you know, and you get the facts. You know, I mean, I'm just trying to, you know, a lot of times we go out a long way, you know, a long time between, you know, getting the minutes and then reviewing them, and sometimes, you know, you forget something or you miss something, whatever. And if somebody disagrees, no, that was said, no, this was said. I'm just wondering if it can happen. That's all. It's just something. I'm just throwing it out there. But okay. So if somebody, you know, doesn't agree with it, that you know, Pat said this or George said that, well, let's play it. See what they said. I don't know.
I mean, I'm not against recording it. I think we have to ask, is there,
I don't know if
maybe we
it's
ask
even,
counsel, is there a legal?
yeah. That was my concern, but I thought it was a good idea, especially, you know, with all
There's no legal prohibition from recording executive session minutes. Many communities use tape recorders to record those minutes, and then they're later transcribed.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with recording.
I don't like the idea. I would oppose it because I think that gives you one more opportunity for leaking discussion. But, and that's not what we're talking about here, but.
I think we have to put that on a different agenda.
Okay. We can add that to a different agenda.
Okay. All right, so then the last responsibility of the clerk is to maintain and update the master version of the policies handbook. Again, that one might be also, unless assigned otherwise by the chair.
Right.
So I guess that did go pretty quickly. The next thing that I had was 1.2.11, which is the
Yeah, I
state.
was fine with that.
With what, removing it?
Yeah. Because
Okay.
I don't ever remember that taking place.
No, it hasn't happened in probably 15 years, yeah. And I think
And the only
part
time
of
I've seen a rep there is when they're giving an award out to
Right.
someone who's served as a town rep for 20 years or 30 years. Or
Okay, everybody else okay with that?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. And then as far as the meeting,
Yep. Again,
change,
Pat, I think it made perfect sense. But you're right. It is. Some people will say, "What's open session? What's public comment?" It's confusing, and we are never really asked to sign anybody in. So
okay,
I'm with you on that one.
all right. Any other comments on that one?
No.
Okay. And then in section 1-3.3, the reference to the civic committee, since we abolished that committee, everybody okay with me removing that?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. In the tax policy section, the information on tax classification, which is at the end of that section, it duplicates. It must. I assume it was added in later after the document was first set up. Everything that's requested in there is also mentioned earlier in the tax policy section, but also in the tax policy section, it has some dates about when information should be required, and maybe, I don't know, maybe we should take a deeper look at that at some point. And reviews, it said the board shall annually review assessment policies, procedures, and methods no later than 14 days prior to the occurrence of the public hearing. Seems like we don't really do that. We get that review during the public hearing, or just as the public hearing is starting. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts about those.
I mean, not to split hairs on that, but don't they usually make that presentation on the first night and then we push it off the meeting, which is technically 2 weeks away?
It
I mean,
is.
I agree with you. More time is better. I think we should include more time.
Want to go with 30 days, you mean, before?
Well, like one meeting before the public hearing starts, because that first one is when the public hearing starts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the problems is the time because you really can't prepare until after you've exited fall annual town meeting, and that could mean you could be not exiting fall annual town meeting till the end of October, and then in order for the state to turn the tax rate around and get bills printed, you really have to be done by the beginning of December. And so if you're going to put a longer time frame for advance information, it may not be doable. Unfortunately, given the realities of approvals by the state for the, because they're processing so many communities, at that time of the year. And again, the assessors can't complete the information until all the information is completed at fall town meeting in terms of the information of the levy. So I think that's the reason that it happens the way it is because those are the real circumstances that are in existence annually.
Should we have a separate, a special meeting or with the assessors prior to this? I mean, just a meeting with the board and the Board of Assessors regarding current values, et cetera. You know what I mean? Like this year, there's big discrepancy in, a big raise in, values in one part, and the other one is going down a little bit. So, I mean, to get that kind of information, I guess they could tell. I guess we could do it publicly, but I'm just saying, the more information you get, the better decision you can make. Obviously,
I know there would obviously have to be a public meeting, but yeah.
The other thing that I looked at with that paragraph that you wanted to delete, Pat, is besides the 14 days, it seems like there's 3 things listed: the anticipated tax rates based on classification shifts, the projected tax bills, and then the aggregate information. And I don't know, my head was having trouble correlating to where that was already covered in the other paragraph. So I just think if we're going to delete this paragraph, we just want to make sure that we aren't deleting content that we still want to get.
Yeah, if you look a little bit further back under 2-2.1, part F is projected view of the effective tax rate, tax levy, and levy totals for each class by proposed percentage of the tax shift.
Oh, that might be what, okay.
And then the other one too, I don't remember exactly where it was. It might be there too, but yeah.
So the question is really whether we can or want to impose a 14-day or other time limit on the assessor's brief.
Right, I guess that's, yeah. And if it can be done, I think it's a good idea that we hear that before we open up the public hearing. Right, it would.
And that the public has time to look at it.
Right.
We could set it as an objective if something changes with the state timing or something like that.
Well, there may be some parts of it that we could get. I mean, Paul, couldn't we get like the percentages, like George was saying, the percentages of each class? Would that be available?
Well, it wouldn't have been this year. I mean, remember, this was a reval year.
Okay.
And so part of the reason we got a late start is we were waiting for state certification of the property values. So, on a reval year, and even during a normal year, non-reval year, you still have to get your new growth certified and everything completed. And remember what happens at that time. Town meeting doesn't start until the Monday after, the third Monday in October, which is the Monday after Columbus Day. If town meeting goes on 2 or 3 sessions, again, you're not exiting until the end of October. And then what happens is you start moving into November, nobody wants to meet, you got Thanksgiving week, so what happens is you're really pushed into that first week of December to have the actual vote by the board. So you have you leave the town meeting at the end of October, the assessors gather and compile the data. You then have the first hearing in mid-November, and then you continue until basically after Thanksgiving, which is 2 weeks later usually. And then you have that final vote in, that first Monday in December, which then gets submitted to the state for final approval, which this year took 2 weeks. And then you basically left with 2 weeks to get the bills processed and printed because they have to be out by the end of December. I just don't know how you can advance it because again, you really can't, the assessors don't put out information until it's certified by the state. In terms of new growth and property valuation, particularly if you're doing an interim adjustment, which happens most years. And then the town meeting appropriations aren't acted upon until town meeting. So I understand the desire to have as much time as possible. The only thing you could do is, schedule more meetings within that narrow window, but I don't see how you can really go beyond what's really a 30-day window to get this done in
So-
total from the end of town meeting to the vote in the first week of December.
So you could, I mean, if that's the case, then another way to take it would just be to say, write something to the effect of, there'll be a good faith effort to do the Board of Assessors briefing as early as possible,
Yeah.
pending availability of data, something like that.
Yeah, and I think the assessors always strive to do that. I mean, I see Sam Chase on the call. I don't know if Sam wants to weigh in, but I do think the assessors try to come in and present the data as soon as possible and to allow the board as much time as possible. So you could add that language, but I just have been through this process almost 15 years, and I've just seen the constraints that everybody's under at that time.
Really.
So is the consensus then just to change the wording to if practical or whenever?
If possible, yeah, I think if possible, everyone would like to do it. I think the problem is if you have a rigid policy, you may not be able to adhere to it.
Right. Why don't we give it a little bit more time, Pat? Maybe you kind of can we put that on the shelf and think about it just a little bit? It's kind of important, obviously it's kind of important, but I don't know.
Well, George, as I'm sure you know, the policy for policies is the first time we talk about them, and then we don't vote whether to accept them until the following meetings, much like alcohol licenses. So what I can do is on these that we have talked about, I can make the changes and redline them so that for the next meeting, you can see what I'm proposing to change and make sure that I'm catching the comments that we're getting, and maybe just put a question mark at that one and we can talk about it again at our next meeting.
Okay. Fine.
All right.
Yeah, I just didn't want to jump into something right now, but like you said, we always go on the next meeting. That's cool.
Yep. So the other thing on the tax policy was the 2-2.5, which is the triennial review of the tax policy, which I don't think anybody ever remembers when it was last reviewed. So it's hard to know when the 3 years are up. And basically that can be done we could do it yearly if we wanted to. We could do it annually. And probably it would not be a bad idea for each board member to review tax policy on a regular basis anyway to see if there's anything they want to change. So, and I don't know if there's anything else in there that anybody wanted to change.
It's fine with me. Makes sense.
Okay. Anybody else?
You're suggesting we review it annually? Is that what you're saying, Pat?
No, I'm just saying that if, maybe each, as it comes time to, especially for tax classification to read it, just read.
Okay, yeah.
And if you see anything that you would like to change and make that, propose that change. But not necessarily to have a review every, at some set timeline, 1, 2, or 3 years. So that's okay?
Yeah.
Sorry with me.
All right, thank you. All right, and then on to alcohol licensing. First one was the submission of maps, which I've never seen, so I'd like to remove that. The request for a topological map, I don't know why we ever even need that.
Okay with me.
And as I was working on this, Christina Bruce has been helping me, and she found a one-page document in her files that looks like it might have been intended to be a policy for. As you may notice that there's a section for conditions placed on review on amendments of alcohol beverages and for package license approval, but there's really not one for approval of new or transferred alcohol beverage licenses. But there was this one that she found, which reads, The Board of Selectmen recognizes that paramount among its responsibilities is a licensing authority for the issuance of alcohol beverage licensing for package stores and restaurants for public safety. In furtherance of this responsibility, the board recognizes that after a public hearing on license applications, additional information might be required and/or new information might become available, which would necessitate the board's consideration prior to any formal vote. Therefore, with respect to its consideration for approval of any application filed with the board for the issuance of a new or transfer of ownership of an existing alcohol beverage license, the board shall, as a matter of policy, postpone any vote on the application until the next meeting. And then also, it does say the board, for good cause, may waive this policy in its discretion. So I think, you know, if that were put in as one of the paragraphs here also, having to do with alcohol licenses.
Can you put that in and just allow us to review it for the next time?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, like I said, we don't have to, we shouldn't vote on anything tonight, but basically, I think that would take care of the issue that we have with our timing where, you know, we say we're gonna wait on the vote. And in the policy right now, it says we're not gonna vote until the next meeting after the closing of the public hearing, which is not true because once we close the public hearing, we can't take any more testimony. So it should be continued until the next meeting, not closed and voted at the next meeting.
Agreed.
Okay with Ken and George?
Yep.
Okay with me.
All right, and then the only other thing I had here was on some of these items that require that something had to be done by a particular date. Like the ADA Act, it says submission of a plan of accessibility no later than December 1, 1994 and December 1 thereafter. I think that's basically reviewed. Paul, is it not? Isn't that a requirement for new licenses to be accessible?
Yes, it's required under building code. Again, I think that goes back to the time of the implementation of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right, Pat. I think they can be removed.
Okay, so you think that whole paragraph?
Let me read that quickly.
Or maybe the whole sentence? I mean, the whole section?
You're talking about
3-2.
3-2. Yeah.
I mean, it does indicate exceptions and waivers, so.
Yeah, but they don't get those from us, do they?
Again, this was 30 years ago. Back then, the
Right.
waivers were granted, in the initial stages in order to not prevent a financial hardship. But I'm not aware of any that exist today.
Okay, so everybody feel like that whole section can be removed then?
I have no problem with it getting removed.
So we're removing 3-1 and 3-2.
That's what it looks like.
Okay.
All right, and then the other two are.
And you're just gonna put a red line through those, right? So that
Yes.
they're still there next week. Okay.
Yes. And then 5.2 and 5.6, open space, town will, let's see, 5-2 talks about an open space committee.
So you just want to take off that last sentence?
I think so. Or even just
That's fine by me.
the committee, or just the last phrase. I mean, the committee will be charged with determining a long-term strategy and with encouragement and enhancement of
Right,
open
and
space.
the town.
Yeah, and then just the last 10 words or whatever.
And with the word town.
Yes, put period after town.
Yep, that's fine by me.
Fine with me also.
Virginia, okay with you?
Yep.
And then the other, last one is the fuel efficient vehicles. I mean, this one, I think we should also remove the specifications about how many miles per gallon on all these types of vehicles.
I had the same thought. It's probably archaic by now.
They're obsolete by now, yeah.
Yeah, they came from the state at the time. They were
Mhm.
the state mandates for qualify as a green community.
So maybe right
Well,
after.
if you're gonna remove, I don't know how much of this you want to chop out, but do you want to put something else in its place about electric vehicles by a certain date, or is there anything similar to what the state put out that would fit here, Paul?
Well, again, there's legislation active right now between the governor and the state legislature that should be finalized within the next several weeks on the new fuel and electric vehicle and other energy requirements. Probably the easiest thing would be, shall be purchased in accordance with with state regulations. Because that's really what's driving all this. The state is adopting standards that we have to adhere to. So, because again, any of these specific ones will be modified over time. So I think that's probably the best way to do it, so you don't have dated information like we have today.
Okay, well, yeah. Do that then. That okay with everybody?
Fair enough.
Pat, I
So we'll make
noticed,
those edits and we'll review them. Go ahead.
can I just ask a couple of other questions I noticed when I was reviewing the document?
Mhm.
When you deleted the personnel policies, I agree with the rationale. I don't know, would it be worth having council just look at those to ensure that if there's something that HR and the personnel committee should either continue maintaining, or if they don't have it already, just to look at, make sure we're not dropping something that's important by just deleting them out of the policy document, I guess is what I'm saying. So I would recommend maybe a council review with the right people against what already exists elsewhere.
Okay. I think what we had there was also what the personnel board was using, but yeah.
Well, I have no idea what exists elsewhere. So my thought was just do a step to sanity check that we're not just dropping something important. On page 5, section 1.1 is our mission statement. And I think personally, I think it looks fine. I brought this up last meeting. If the board doesn't have any changes to that mission statement, I would recommend that be what goes on the Board of Selectmen website, and that the vision and values somehow get migrated to the homepage. And then in section 1-2, I noticed two things. One, the second paragraph says the board is authorized to hire, manage, and terminate for a cause a qualified town manager in accordance with the town charter. I'm suggesting that we change that to delete for a cause and qualified, and just say the board is authorized to hire, manage, and terminate a town manager in accordance with the town charter, because any qualifications that are put on this are superseded by the charter anyway. So I think that should just be in accordance with the charter. And then in paragraph E, it says the town manager and his professional conduct. And I noticed somewhere else, I can find it for you offline, Pat, there was a his, her. I think any of those types of references should be changed to they or their, to the general gender neutral terminology.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know how, I know there are a few of those in there, yeah.
So those are two suggestions. And then I'm still stuck on section 1-26, the contract review, where it says the select board shall be notified of and allowed to review all contract proposals, RFPs, and bids at the town manager's office at least 5 working days prior to the bid award. Where everything's electronic now, I don't know that at the town manager's office really makes sense to leave in there. And right now, we don't really get access until like 1.5 to 2 business days, or even notified about the award, because we don't know about it till it comes out on the agenda. So I just think if this is important and we want the flexibility to know and to have time to review documents, we just need to build something into our systematic approach to this, that maybe when an RFP goes out, Paul lets us know it went out, so we can maybe not review for comment, but just be able to digest it. So we're not looking at hundreds of pages if we want to dive that deep before we recommend a bid award. And then the other material related to the RFP responses and the bids, I would think that that could be accessible. You know, if somebody wants more than the executive summary that's presented at the board meeting, I would think that could easily be accessible in a Dropbox or a folder somewhere that we could look at it. So I just think we need a conscious decision about what to do with this paragraph, because we're not doing it now.
Okay, well, I mean, as you know, I mean, we're not done with these. In fact, one of the things that I was gonna propose, on this one, it was mainly taking things out, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
I was gonna propose it, that on the contract review, that we ask the town, or direct the town manager, when an RFP is issued, that the board also get an email that day, maybe even, you know, copied on wherever it goes to somewhere else, telling us, you know, when it's gonna be issued, obviously what it's about, maybe even when the vendor conference is, when the deadline is for bid awards to be received, and when they're going to be open. Just have those dates, and then if we're interested, you're right, we can ask for the document itself, or we could put those in our calendar. So I know Ken has a couple of times said he wanted to be there for a bid opening. We could put it in our own calendar for when that bid opening might be, and then have that in front of us.
So maybe we can look at that paragraph a little bit more.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that was going to be something.
Because I mean, I sign up for the notices from the website if an RFP is issued, but I mean, then I have to go in and like actually sign up as an interested vendor or something to see them. So anyway, I just think that paragraph we need to look at. If we're going to keep it, we need to make it what we want it to be and then implement it.
Okay.
So Pat, new policies would be kind of a next phase after this.
Correct.
And then my other question is, there's 2 other documents that in my handbook. One is the liquor license regulations, and the other is the special and 1-day liquor license regulations. So those also, I mean, at minimum, those also reference Board of Selectmen.
Yes. And
so all that language would need to be changed at some point. I don't know when that was on your screen, but I didn't know if that was part of this process.
Yeah. In fact, Christina reminded me about those and said, yeah, once we get these, but the easy part of those, changing the names, yeah, those can be done fairly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else for tonight from anyone else? Thanks. So I'll put those changes in and have it for the next meeting. Do you want me to wait until the following meeting to propose new ones, or accept these at the next meeting and then have proposals for any thoughts on that? Wait for the new board?
Do we have, I don't think we have to wait. We can always propose new policies.
Right.
Is there a punch list right now of new policy?
I have just like 3 or 4, including the one that you had mentioned to me a couple of weeks ago about proclamation.
Do you want to bring a list of recommendations to the next meeting?
Okay, I can
for
do
new
that.
policies, and then we can maybe. I don't know what Ken and George think. I'm just sorry, I didn't mean to take over the conversation.
No problem.
I'm right on board with you, Virginia. I'm good with that. I think we push forward.
Okay.
No question.
All right. So our next meeting, maybe there won't be much more than just policy, but.
Don't bet on it.
Yeah. I know.
I'm sure Paul will fill it up fast with the agenda.
All right. So thanks everybody for your feedback, and.
Well, thanks for that work, Pat.
I think I'm kind of getting the hang of it now. Just took a while.
the worst part of it is the formatting. You know, you're trying to, as you go through these documents and you just find different styles, different types, and you try to fix the document, and you touch one thing and it shifts everything down a whole page and everything gets screwed up.
Yeah, there were places where it was coming up and it was changing the bullets from letters to, well, to the Greek alphabet, and I still don't know why it does that. So
it's Greek to you, Pat.
It was definitely Greek to me, for sure. Anyway.
All right. Well, with that, we'll move on to visions and value acknowledgement, the conversation that we started at the last meeting, and then we got a little bit of feedback here from Paul Haverty and a sample.
So if I may, Ken, I might be able to keep this quick tonight. So I reviewed what Paul wrote, and I spoke to him a little bit. My thought is that if we're going to ask them to say they've received it, like right now, the vision part that he pulled in doesn't encompass the whole vision statement. So I don't know if we just want it all in one page. But my other thought was that this is probably a new policy that we want to ask assigned boards to sign the acknowledgement, and, you know, encourage elected boards to sign it too, even if we can't require it. So I don't know if this should go in the new policy bucket, the new policy list for Pat. Pat, I'm happy to take the action to finish refining this with Paul and come forward with a recommendation and what the, you know, the policy language along with the acknowledgement, if the board wants to continue going down this path with something like this.
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
So I'll just take the action to follow up with Paul Haverty on the acknowledgement form, and I will contribute to helping write the policy piece of it too. If Pat, you want to include this on the list you bring next time.
Okay, I will do that.
All right.
All right. Now, Pete, so we're good with vision value. And if we are, I'll bring Pete on the line to talk about the Zoom bombing mitigation challenges or options. Pete, you threw one at us late this afternoon or earlier today, whatever you want to call it, by adding the breakout session. So you want to just go through how that would work?
Yeah, you know, that might actually be the best one. You know, and, you know, last meeting was crazy. Today we had nothing. You know, it's one of those things that had been quiet for months, I would say. But the breakout room, some of you who work with Zoom, even, you know, more than I, might be familiar with the breakout room. It's like a sub meeting. It's like the Zoom equivalent of a breakout session at a physical conference. And what we would do is we would broadcast the breakout room, which means that someone like me would be in the main room. So when people enter the meeting, everyone would enter the main room, and I would moderate. I would say, "Who are you? Can you please turn on your camera? Oh, you're, you know, Pete Padula from Chelmsford Street. Go ahead." And then send that person to the meeting. Now, then once they're in the meeting is the breakout room. Now, I can, at that point, I'm not in that, I'm only in, and none of you are in the main meeting. You guys are all in the breakout meeting, along with the quote unquote approved attendees and participants. I can be in both because, like, for example, tonight I'm on 2 computers. If you can see, I'm listed twice. And so I can also try to be in that one, but, you know, Ken and Virginia, I mean, you know, and whoever else who's a co-host, you still have the ability to kick someone out if someone falls through this filtering system. So you can kick them out of the breakout room. But I can also probably, you know, without me using another staff member, or we could get maybe help from someone else, I'm not sure. So kind of talking around in circles here. There's 2 separate.
So Pete, when someone's in the waiting room, we can't chat with them, right?
You can chat to everyone in the waiting room at once. But I think what I've found, a lot of people do not respond to the chat. And, you know, I fall victim to this myself. You know, sometimes there's no dinging, you know, so you don't see it. And Yeah, I have done that a lot, Ken. You know, trying to say, who are you? What is your deal?
Right.
You know, and you know, I wait if especially in a meeting where there's a lot of suspicious activity, I wait. And if I don't get an answer, a lot of times those people just go away. But there's really never any way of knowing if they went away because they've, you know, they really wanted to be there.
But even like you just said, I mean, we early on had a couple experiences where someone who was in our meeting left the meeting, and then immediately we saw them rejoining the meeting. So we let them in, and it turned out they were the bomber.
Yes.
You know, and it was like they grab our agenda ahead of schedule, see someone might be speaking, they're coming into the room under a pseudonym, you know, and now we have them in the room. I mean, you're right. The last meeting, we've never experienced anything like that last meeting. That was off the rails nuts. But I like the idea of the breakout room, especially if the televised version is the breakout room, not the real meeting, or you know, the main trunk meeting.
I mean, a lot of it's just experimenting. I think it will work.
Can we try it once and see how it works?
Of course, you know, and I
One-
mean,
One suggestion I would have with that is maybe Pete, I know in one of the suggestions you suggested, like we spend the first 15 minutes from 6 o'clock or whatever, letting people in, but maybe alternatively, if you could accommodate it, put a notice on the agenda that members of the public wishing to join the meeting are encouraged to log on 10 minutes prior for screening or something like that.
yeah, I mean so
So that you're not trying to help us start the meeting and doing all this at the same time, and then we're also not cutting into the meeting time.
yeah, I don't, you know, whoever does the agendas and however else, you know, absolutely. The earlier
You're on 15 minutes earlier. You're on early anyway, right?
I'm always the first one because I
Yeah.
have to make sure that all this stuff is going because, you know, we have a lot of systems that need to be in place so that it gets out to all the different channels and venues. But
Which
yeah.
works better from your standpoint?
Well, I think the breakout room, this is really probably first of all, like taking time from the beginning of the meeting is not really a great idea. As you know, your meetings can be long. Secondly, some of the others with the pre-registration would add administration to the whole thing, which I don't think anyone wants to do. I know I don't want to do it. So this way, I'm not doing all that much different than I'm doing now. I am just screening people, and I'm doing it with a name and a face, you know, rather than trying to guess who iPhone 7 is, or, you know, if I see.
Yeah, my only question was if Christina were to put in here to say, you know, members of the public are wishing to participate are encouraged to log on X number of minutes before the meeting, does that work for you, or are you too busy doing other stuff?
No, because I can always just wait, you know, if I'm doing something, I just let them in when I can let them in. No, by that time, I'm usually just waiting for people to join. Right, George? George and I were chatting 10 minutes early today. So, you know, usually, and if something goes wrong, then, you know, then it's whatever. I'm running around like a crazy person trying to figure it out.
So Pete, if the people that would be in the main room, would they be able to see what's going on in a meeting?
So I've actually never done, I don't think so. No. So it's kind of like they're in their own meeting, but in this case, we're not using it as a meeting. It's like a waiting room with video and audio and talk back rather than just chat back.
Yeah, see, something like that, I don't know that it would work, because what if somebody's here for a public hearing? So basically they would not be able to hear what's being said until you allowed them to speak and come into the.
No, they'd come in.
No,
They would come in right in the beginning.
Right. He's going to do it all at the beginning and let people in that way.
Once people come into the room, Pat, and he can voice verify them, they get into the breakout room.
It's instantaneous.
Oh, so they wouldn't be held there until it was their time
No.
to.
No.
Just once we're sure that they're real and there for a good purpose.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's worth a try. But I wanted to talk about the chat thing too. I think, quite frankly, I think the chat should be not used at all. I think you should.
I agree.
Ban the chat, because it's like if we have a public meeting and somebody stands up in the middle of the audience and just starts, talking. It's distracting, it's rude. You can do a raise your hand. You can tell
There's
them,
actually a raise your hand button too they
That's
can
right.
use.
Well, let me ask Pete a question on that. Is there a way to shut off the chat for everybody except for Pete and I go back and forth because we discuss who's trying to come in the room and what's going on in the meeting in a private chat. And it helps because I say to Pete, Pete will say to me, who's this person? You know him? And I'll say, yeah, I recognize the name. They're in for this. And then I'll ask him, well, who's that person? And I don't know. And we don't let him in. So we chat back and forth as we're running the meeting.
So I don't know if there's, I'm looking at the settings now. I don't know if there's a way to do that. I'd have to look more deeply.
Because the only other way we do it is Pete and I text, which I don't really like having my phone in front of me when I'm on the meeting.
Right.
But ideally, this really should eliminate, I mean, if we do the breakout room thing, because other than that, there's really not a reason for us to chat. And if,
all right, so if we shut off the chat and we do it that way, and then Pete, are you going to have two people? Because like, if you're not in the room, but if you're in the main room and not in the waiting room, and we have a problem with swapping host, co-host,
right.
will there be another person for us to talk to, or will you be in there and someone else will be out?
So, you know, obviously the safest way would be to have two people. And, you know, but like I could be in both because I would be on two computers at once, which is actually what I'm doing right now. It's doable. I mean, and ideally, and again, the proof is in the trying. Ideally, once the people that get into the breakout room, they should be vetted. You know, that doesn't mean they won't, that something.
Right.
So it should really eliminate that.
So I'm willing to give up the chat feature, but I will, you know, after a couple meetings, if there's an issue where, you know, we'll just have to reevaluate if there's a benefit for even just us to have it back and forth. But
Well,
I'm willing to give it
and
up.
Ken, if Pete is managing the main room admission into the breakout room, if he's having an issue, he can always turn the chat function on to let you know.
Right.
It's in his control. It's just that for the bulk of the meeting, just keep it off.
Yeah,
Right.
no, I can always.
Okay.
We had the same issue with the tri-board meeting. There was a whole separate conversation going on in the chat. It was
Right. Yeah.
inappropriate.
And I can always poke my voice in, even though somehow it's just more effective sometimes, you know, than the chat. 'Cause people don't see the chat a lot.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the way your meetings tend to go, I mean, and it's normal. I mean, most of the activities at the beginning. So once most people are in, then I should be able to concentrate on the breakout room on the second computer, and then poke over and see if someone's trying to get in. Like Pat, like you said, like someone coming for a public hearing or something like that. They will need to be let in. But it should work, you know, famous last words, we can try it, you know, and, you know, if it doesn't work well, it won't work as badly as it did last meeting. So we can refine and try plan B or C.
Yeah.
and,
Okay. I mean, we don't know until we try it.
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, maybe it's worth noting too, that there's no requirement for us to have the open session or the public input session or whatever we're going to call it. So really the only reason we absolutely have to let people in would be for a public hearing.
Right. You have a lot of people on this meeting that they can be watching the exact same thing on YouTube, which is right. It's right there, you know, so
On TV.
On TV or on their computer, the same computer that they would be watching on Zoom, they could be on live.chelmsfordtv.org. It's the exact same thing.
That is for right now.
Yeah. So, but it's not really a problem. It's just more, you know, I mean, I recognize all these folks are, you know, a lot of people are on the meeting, and that's fine. They're here. The problem is, you know, anyone can call themselves Sam Chase and join the meeting. You know, I don't have any way of knowing if that's actually Sam Chase, not to pick on Sam, but, you know.
Paul, do you have any other thoughts on this?
No, I think it's worth giving a shot to the breakout room and seeing if it works. You know, I think it's worth a try. You know, we can always revisit it if, you know, depending on our experience.
And I'll juggle on mine, whether it's if I can handle it alone or if I get some help. Maybe I'll get some help for the first one and see how it goes. You know, so.
And maybe in
Well,
4 or 5 months, we won't have to be talking about this.
That's the other thing.
Right.
So, I thought the
I mean,
novel-
Go ahead. You have two Chelmsford telemeeting on now, right?
Yeah, we're on. Yes, we're streaming to YouTube right now. Yeah.
No, what I mean is there's two people from Chelmsford telemeeting on here now.
Yeah, that's both me.
Oh, that's both of you. Okay.
That's exactly what I would be. I mean, it's
right.
on in 2 places.
Okay. You're a saint. Only saints can do that. All right.
So, all right. Well, we'll try it. We'll try it that way. And so, actually, I would ask you guys maybe if you all could join just 10 minutes early as well, and even if it's just to get there and then zone out till we get started, just to be sure. We'll do that at the next meeting.
Yep.
All right. Cool. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Pete, for hanging in.
Oh yeah, always an adventure. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye. With that, we'll go on to liaison reports and referrals. Pat, you want to start?
I have nothing tonight.
Good. George?
Good.
Make it quick. All right, you're muted, George. Unmute.
How's that? Okay.
Good. Yep.
Sorry. I just want to say thank you to Lenny Olenchek. I hope he's feeling better, and I congratulate him on a great job he did for the town for all those years, and we'll miss him. So thank you. That's it.
Virginia? Oh, thanks, George.
Yep. So the school committee budget hearing for public input will be tomorrow, February 23rd, and you can find the details in the budget document through the agenda. As Paul mentioned, the finance committee has initiated budget reviews for the Springtown meeting warrant. They'll be meeting on most Thursdays, so you want to just check for their agenda postings and updates if you're interested in that. The planning board meeting this Wednesday, February 24th, will include a continued public hearing for the Springtown meeting warrant articles, which include the Center Village parking requirements, the addition of bylaws to address e-commerce fulfillment centers, dark stores, and ghost kitchens, and the addition of bylaws to address the addition of non-retail marijuana establishments. And they will also be continuing their public hearing for 248 Princeton Street, which is the former Glenview restaurant site, for construction of a 10-unit multifamily lot. I just have one other thing. I wanted to suggest that on our March 8th agenda, I think the next one, that we just allocate maybe 10 minutes for candidates for townwide office to give a 30 to 60 second introduction of themselves.
That's another thing I'm not a big fan of. I think anybody who's running for any office these days has ample opportunity to introduce themselves to the community. It just sounds like a campaign commercial to me when we invite them to our meetings. No other board does it. No other town that I know does it.
I guess, Pat, we spend meeting after meeting announcing that the elections are the papers can be pulled and the election's gonna happen. And I don't really see any harm in helping to facilitate an introduction to the community. It's not any kind of position statement.
So what would you limit it to? Would you say that they couldn't talk about what they would do if they were selected?
You give them a 30 to 60 second time limit for a brief introduction. Just like we used to do when they were, yeah, just to introduce themselves, who they are, and maybe just why they're running. Whatever they want, however they want to use that 30 to 60 seconds. But
that's what I'd be concerned about, however they want to use it. I mean, what if they want?
If you limit it to 30 to 60 seconds, there's not a whole lot of.
Pat, why did they used to do it?
It was a big thing for Dennis Reddy. He was the one who proposed it at first. So you know when that was? I mean, that was back in the 80s when we didn't have internet. We didn't even, I don't even know if we had cable access. And I don't, yeah. And it just got to be a tradition, I guess you could say, and it wasn't intended, and it wasn't until very recently, I think when Glenn Diggs was chair, that it was for all candidates. It was only for select board candidates that it would be invited, and they would get like.
I wouldn't mind it, if they just gave because we could be working with these people. I don't even have a clue. I've never met most of them, and even if it was just a 30-second file, how long you been in town, where do you live, and little background. I'm running and that's it. I don't want to know why they're running. I don't necessarily want to know what they would do, but even if they just got a background and interest, I couldn't pick these people out of a crowd. Well, two of them. I could pick George Dixon, I guess, and then
you could tell them that if that makes you more comfortable, to just say that you limit it to this scope, an introduction of who you are and your background, period, and no platform.
We did it for a while about 6 or 8 years ago, and then we candidate that was.
My only thought was there's just so many competitive positions right now for townwide offices. I thought it might be a good thing to do for the community to just allow people to give themselves a high level introduction, especially before you get into all the debates. But
Well, the chair makes the agenda.
I'm not hard over on it. I just thought we should discuss it at least.
well, maybe we'll everybody think about it, and we'll follow it up, and then
Well, the next meeting, you'd have to do it pretty
Yeah.
soon, Ken. You're
yeah, I
right.
know. As I was going to say that, I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't work. Well, no, we have still 2 more meetings before election.
Okay, but if it's just an introduction, sooner is better than later, because by the time, if you wait till the end of March, you're through all the debates by then, so it's kind of a moot point.
All right, then I'm just gonna. I'm okay with they come and just give a background, a bio, and a background, and introduce themselves, give a bio and a background.
And you're going to stop them if they start getting into
Yeah.
policy? You are?
If I tell them you got 30 seconds and just start with the bio and go from there. I mean, if they start, we'll just shut them off. Just say it's limited to bio only. We just give them clear instructions up front.
So Ken, can you just write up a short couple of sentences for Christina to put in a invitation?
Yep. All right. Is that it, Virginia?
And if it gets out of control, I promise I won't bring it up next year, Pat.
Okay.
You just hit the mute button, the power of the chair. And then I don't have anything for liaison reports either. So we'll go to press questions. I don't see anybody unless someone became a press. Nothing, no chat, nothing. Okay. Anything else?
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor by roll call. Pat?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Virginia?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Everybody stay safe. Thanks for your time tonight, Paul.
Thank you.
Take care.